a playlist original.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Back to the Blockbuster. My name is Gaius Bowling. There are a few special episodes of Back to the Blockbuster this month because I'm recording a lot for the month of December to get us through the new year because Playlist that does most of our editing and marketing and all that for the podcast, they are going on a much deserved vacation from December 22nd to January 2nd. So I have been stockpiling episodes for them to just have on deck for you guys so there are no gaps. And I am very excited about this one because I planned on doing a 20th anniversary episode for 25th Hour. But I had someone that messaged me about it to kind of reaffirm that I was going to do it. At first, I was going to try to get a gaggle of people on to talk about it, but I felt like with a movie like this, it might be better with a one-on-one conversation with someone else that loves the movie maybe just as much as I do. So I'm glad to have our boy JC back on. He was on for our Home Alone 2 30th anniversary episode along with David Gonzalez, and he's back again for this. He actually said he was going to be back on that episode towards the end there. And you're going to actually hear him again in another episode in our December slate. So get used to him. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back, JC. Thank you for being on again.
Thank you for having me. Like as soon as cause since I do the movie page, I tend to like to do anniversary posts for like reviews for movies I love. So
Yeah.
I'm like 25th hours coming up. Like let me hit up G because I think besides me, you are the only person that I know that loves it to the extent that I do. Like it's
Yeah.
my third favorite Spike Lee movie, which I remember is always so shocking when I tell people because they'll think Inside Man or He Got Game,
Yeah.
but like so I'm like, nah, I'm like, gee, I know he's doing something. I want to be part of it because, like, I want to be because I know me and you are gonna be able to have a really, really great conversation about this movie that we both love.
Yeah, definitely. I think just from following G Reels and you've seen I've posted about 25th Hour on more than one occasion. I usually on the anniversary of 9/11, I usually always post the opening credit scene because like I personally have no other than it being a like tragic like US event.
Yeah,
I have no personal connection to 9/11. I didn't live in New York and I didn't have a lot of friends there at the time. So I connect through those kind of things through like art. So like that opening credit scene for me kind of says everything that I want to say
incredible.
or need to say. Um, and I know I posted it a few times and you've seen it. I've talked about the movie on our podcast. I know I probably tell the story again. I brought it up with like Owen a few times. It's a movie that's really important to me. And it became instantly important the first time I saw it 20 years ago. If I want to feel real old. Um, but before we get into the movie, I want you to kind of tell people about your Instagram page again. And I know that you mentioned it when we did our Home Alone episode, but refreshers never hurt, just in case someone didn't listen to that one, they'll be listening to this one.
Yeah, so I run a movie page called Mark with the Movies. I pretty much do a little bit of everything. Like I review new movies, I post trailers, I post breaking news on TV and film. I post TV reviews. Um, I'm very into like putting people onto movies. So like G could attest to this. Like I review a lot of really obscure movies or indies. Like right now I'm doing a yearly project where every Friday I'm reviewing what I consider an underrated movie, which is a movie that basically made 10 minutes or less. I feel that's a cutoff point. Like if a movie doesn't make more than 10 minutes, usually a lot of people don't know about it because it's not
Yeah.
a movie that got marketed a lot. And then next year, given I did a poll, so next year I'll be tackling movies from the 90s. So pretty
Okay.
much I usually do like my regular reviews and news and stuff like that, but I like to do these side projects where it's like recommending movies like 31 Days of Halloween, 25 Days of Christmas, and I like to really choose movies that aren't well known. Like I don't like I'll post like Psycho and The Shining a little bit like that if they're streaming somewhere, but I usually like to go for like like unknown movies because I really like to spot because like me and G run with a lot of people that review and talk about the most popular movies.
Right.
So with me and my page, I like to just spot like smaller films that people might not know, which is why I review. Like I mean, this year alone, I've seen like 225 releases and reviewed
Yeah.
almost every single one of them in the page, and I have passion for it. So yeah, like my page is just you pretty much find a little bit of everything. I don't discriminate, so I review pretty much all types of movies. I review LGBT movies. Just anything like that. There's nothing I don't give a try to. I'm a film lover, I'm a cinephile, so I watch everything.
Yeah, it's cool. Like I like the showcase you have about like lesser known movies. I used to do something on G Reels a long time ago, and I'm kind of mad that I stopped it, and maybe I'll bring it back. I used to have like fan favorite Fridays, which were like supposed to be like obscure movies that like have
I think
like
I remember that thing.
that have like a dedicated fan base, but they maybe they didn't do well at the box office and stuff like that. And I think that's how like I think that's how maybe you found out like I like movies like Go, and maybe even something like this one like people don't really like hear about a lot. Um, and like with my page too, like it's I like to cover a little bit of everything, but like I think it's nice to kind of to cover obscure movies that people aren't really talking about because everyone is covering like what's popular and what's new. um so yeah, I'm glad that you actually
Oh,
showcase a little bit of
it's funny you mentioned Go because that's actually the first movie I'm gonna do for '90s Film Fridays.
oh
Because
great.
the reason the reason I chose that was because when I was doing Underrated Film Friday, I mean, because Go is such a movie that it's getting popular over the years because Doug Lyman went on to do Born Identity,
Yeah, and they want to
Edit
discover all his
Tomorrow.
other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Katie Holmes obviously became bigger because Dawson's Creek just became bigger as it is.
Yeah.
And then I was surprised when that made like 35 minutes. I'm like, damn, I can't do Go. I want to review it. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to wait for the 25th anniversary in freaking 2024, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's I think I what I haven't the we on our spin-off the deep dive thing. When we were trying to
Yeah,
choose movies, it's been like we're doing episode 2 on Monday, and I think that's going to be one of the ones I choose to deep dive because like
definitely,
I know for
definitely.
sure Owen hasn't seen it, and that's what I kind of want to do with like some of the deep dives is like not just have it be stuff that we both have already seen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
fresh eyes.
yeah, fresh eyes. And that kind of takes me back to this one because, like, for this movie, um, like a lot of people call it like my friendship like rite of passage movie because if I'm like, hey, have you seen 25th Hour? And they're like, no, I never seen it. And then like I show it to them, it's almost like they're like, that means I think he wants to be friends with you. and so I did it with I did that with my buddy Lance like 3 or 4 years ago, the first time I went to New York, and like he hadn't seen it, and so I watched it. It hit differently watching it, even though it was just on like Blu-ray or whatever. Watching it in New York though, it just kind of felt different.
No, because it's like I get it.
Yeah, you feel like that. Yeah, and then so like, and he ended up liking it. And then like when Owen and I were first becoming friends, that was one of the first movies I recommended, and like we watched that together, and like he really liked it too. So like it is a movie I kind of try to like introduce to people because a lot of people, even though I think it is getting a bigger kind of fan base over time,
Yeah.
still a lot of people haven't seen it. It's something that they actually talk about on the commentary that I'll bring up in a bit. But yeah, it's amazing to me because it has such a stat cast and like pretty good pedigree, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle a bit when it came out 20 years ago. And I think when people were trying to discover other films by Spike Lee, like they're like maybe they're I don't even know if they even start with Spike Lee. I think sometimes they'll go like, "Oh, that movie stars Edward Norton." Like, how did I miss that one?
Yeah,
Uh,
because like the poster is his face, giant face, or the other
yeah,
poster is him with the dog.
with a dog.
So
Yeah,
it's like you think of Edward Norton first.
yeah, of course. So I guess depending on when you want to call the anniversary. So it had like a New York premiere December
I was gonna
16th,
ask that.
2002. It opened in limited release in the US on December 19th, 2002. It didn't go wide until I think early January of the next year. Limited release, I'm just going to call it as it being like the actual like 20th anniversary of the
Yeah,
movie.
I was gonna ask you that I'm posting a review. I'm like I gotta ask you,
When do
is
you
it
want to
the
do it?
16th or the 19th?
Well, dude, I've done it twice. I remember I did it twice for The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I was like, yo, I love this movie, so here's its limited release anniversary, and here's its wide early. And but we'll call it December 19th, 2002. It
Okay.
opened 20 years ago on that day. If you happen to be in New York for the New York premiere, and maybe you saw it 20 years ago on December 16th, we can rock with that as well. Um, but it is a 2002 American drama directed by Spike Lee, or as like he likes to call it, a Spike Lee joint.
Joint.
Starring Edward Norton, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Barry Pepper, Rosario Dawson, Anna Paquin, and Brian Cox. It is based on a novel by David Benioff, uh, and he actually wrote the screenplay. His novel is called The 25th Hour, and that name might sound familiar because he became even bigger, having being a big part of Game of Thrones. For better or worse, depending on how you look at it. By the time the show wraps up, uh, um, but it's a really bare bones story about a man's last 24 hours of freedom as he prepares to go to prison for 7 years for dealing drugs. Just the cliff notes about kind of what it was like when the movie came out. The movie got really good reviews when it came out. It was released by Touchstone Pictures, which was part of Disney. Disney used to use Touchstone Pictures as their way
Yeah,
of
like they're
releasing more
adult.
adult, mature films. It got some of the best reviews of Spike Lee's career because he can be hit or miss, especially around that time.
Yeah,
And then
he was a bad freak.
yeah, and then like I was looking on several like different review websites. A lot of critics have since named it one of the best films of the decade. I'm like re-examining it and reevaluating it, and we were going to talk about this probably in a little bit of detail. It gets a lot of praise. It was the first movie to shoot in New York City after the September 11 attacks, and that is very much a part of the film's DNA. Really, Spike Lee. This is not a part of the book, but Spike Lee made a choice to make 9/11 and a very much a part of the New York City he was trying to depict in this film. He didn't want to pretend like they were living in a New York City where that didn't happen. A very bold choice, but I think it gives the movie a much more like it already has a lot of emotional heft, but I think it gets a lot more from the from New York City becoming a character in and of itself because it's presented in such an honest way. Um, but when we start these, we like to talk about when we first discovered it or when we first saw it. So I'm going to throw it to JC to let us all know, when did you first see the movie, and what was it like when you first saw it? Like that first experience after seeing it for the first time.
Okay, so my story is actually funny because the DVD came out like in '03. I can't remember when it was, but you remember the cover for 28 Days Later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was
It's still the
red
red, the red.
and
Yeah,
and it had 20 something in the title. 28 Days Later was a huge movie that year. It was
yeah,
like a
yeah.
big blockbuster, a big thing. So my friends were kept talking, oh, 28 Days Later. I went to Blockbuster. Stupidly, because I had seen the cover and then the title, I rented 25th Hour instead.
So it was like the
So
number, the color red, and then you were like, all right,
yeah,
that's
because
close
I
enough.
knew I knew I knew the 28 Days Later cover was red. I'm like, then I said 20 something, whatever. Remember, this was before social media and smartphones. So, it's not like I could look it up. This is '03 we're talking about here. So, so I was just like, I rented it, watched it. I loved it. But then I'm like, where the hell were the zombies?
Where are the zombies?
Yeah, like I said, this was before social media. Like I couldn't go on Google. I mean, I could have gone on Google in my freaking Dell desktop, but like we didn't really do that back in the days. So
Yeah.
then I told my friends, oh no, you rented the wrong movie. But then I'm like, so
Well,
that's how I ended up putting on people because I'm like, no, but the movie that I saw was really
you're like, I
good.
found something really good.
Yeah, I was like, so like it's always a great story when I think about it. I'm like, I literally discovered this. I mean, I probably, given how much movies I watch, I would have discovered it eventually because like I like to brag about it, but me and Spike Lee have the same birthday, so he's my
Oh, there you
birthday
go.
twin.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Like eventually I would have discovered it, but I discovered it I was 11 years old in 2003, so I know, Jim, I'm making you feel old by saying that.
I
I was
know,
only
I
11
know.
in
God damn
2003.
it. It's okay.
But so like I discovered it sooner than I probably would have, and I've loved it ever since. And like I said at the beginning, it's my third favorite Spike Lee movie after Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing. And it's
Yeah.
just it's just like an amazing movie. Like I was already an Edward Norton fan from Fight Club, Rounders, and American
Primal
History
Fear.
X, which is
X,
when
yeah.
I was if Primal. I hadn't seen Primal Fear yet when I saw this, but
Okay.
I had seen Fight Club. That was a huge DVD movie, and then American History X is like my brothers just love gang stuff, so that was a movie that they put me on at a young age. And Rounders, it was just like Rounders was a huge big deal. They called Matt Damon and Edward Norton at the perfect time in '98 with that movie. So the movie
They were
that
in their sweet
circulated
spot. That was their sweet spot. Yeah, there was like the late '90s for them.
'97 and
Like
'98, like
right after
Panic
Good
to
Will
Mr.
Hunting.
Ripley, all
Yeah,
that
after Good Will Hunting, Mr.
movies.
Ripley for Matt Damon, and then like after Primal Fear and like People versus Larry Flint and like a bunch of other movies for Edward Norton. They were
No way,
like,
the Weinstein Boys, for better or worse.
yeah. Well, they probably don't like that now, but yeah, yeah,
It's like every time I see Miramax, I'm like, damn. Like, cause
yeah,
like I remember when I started getting sidetracked. It was like when people like there was like a movie that somebody posted about a few days ago on Instagram. They was like, oh, about Burn. Burn is becoming a top 10 hit on Netflix now. Because like
yeah,
people are discovering it and be like, "Oh, that's a Weinstein movie." I had to comment. I'm like, if you're gonna make that face, then you're pretty much gonna miss on so many important movies
yeah.
from
You can't
'92 to
see any.
2017.
Yeah, you can't see
Like, you
anything.
just gotta get over that. Like, if he was a director, I understand. But he was just a producer, the money man. Like,
Yeah,
so you don't gotta miss out on a lot of movies because there's a Weinstein company or a Miramax movie. But
yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much my funny story of how I discovered 25th Hour, which I've loved for the last 19 years.
That's awesome. That's a fun way to discover it. I mean, my story's not fun, but that is a funny. I mean, the fact that you thought you were reading 28 days later instead of like
Although
that's
2 hours, I'm
hilarious.
like, where's the
And
zombies?
where's the zombies? Why is Edward Norton? I didn't even know Edward Norton was in it. Uh, yeah, that's hilarious. So I actually saw it in theaters that opening weekend. Um, and it was one of those things. So like this is December of 2002, so I had just turned 18. Uh, this is also after high school, so I'm in my first semester at LA Film School. So I'm actually this is when I start to discover more
Really get into
independent
film.
independent movies and not trying to watch mainstream stuff a lot. So a lot of my friends at the time were more honed in on movies like this than I was. I remember seeing a trailer for it, um, but didn't think much of it. And then when it was opening that weekend, I had a few friends that were like, "Hey, like, um, let's go see this." I mean, like, it can't be bad, right? And like at this time in my life, I kind of rediscovered the work of Spike Lee a few years later. I didn't really pay attention to it a lot at that point when I was like about to turn 18. I had seen some of his movies. Malcolm X was one that stuck with me. And then Do the Right Thing. But then there was a lot of them that I had seen where I was like, oh, I don't really, I was kind of iffy about at the time.
Yeah, he's in a quiet taste at times.
But Do the Right Thing, I remember loving the first time I saw it, and Malcolm X as well. And but then like what pushed me to more than my friends also pushed me to see it. Once I found out, I was like, all right, we got Edward Norton, uh, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Even then, I was like, these are really good names, and
Yeah, with the PTA movies.
I remembered Rosario Dawson. I probably shouldn't have seen this movie because I was young, but I remembered her from Kids, which was like a
I
really
saw Young Too.
not,
It's all good.
I saw that movie way too young, but I remembered her from that. I also remembered her from He Got Game, which is another Spike Lee movie. Um, the only person in the cast I wasn't familiar with was Barry Pepper. Um, but everyone else, I was like, well, Anna Paquin, she was in X-Men. I hadn't seen the piano at
Rogue.
the time, so
She's on
like
that.
yeah, she's
She's
on
on
that.
that.
I hadn't seen her. I hadn't seen her Oscar winning work until way later. Later, I hadn't seen the piano until years after.
I didn't see that in college.
And then I was familiar a bit with Brian Cox as well. So I was like, all right, let's go see it. And I, I've said this a lot, and people always are like, how do you determine what your favorite movie is, right? I can probably tell you that yes, there are movies that people will throw out there that were like, oh, I think that's a better movie. It's, technical values are better and all this stuff. But sometimes your favorite movie are the ones that like resonate you, the ones that stick with you, that never really leave you. when I saw this movie after it was done, like I instantly felt I had seen my favorite movie, like ever up to that point, and
That's a great feeling.
it has continued to stay with me like that ever since. And it's like, and it's so funny because the story is so simple, but there is something so grounded and real about it. Um, that I feel like I'm not really watching a film. I mentioned this when we did our deep dive episode about prisoners, where you feel like you're watching actors who aren't acting, like they feel like they're
Yeah,
just characters.
they immerse you.
Yeah, and that's what the characters in this movie do for me. Like everyone feels completely real. I don't feel like I'm watching Edward Norton play Montgomery Brogan. I feel like I'm watching Montgomery Brogan. You know, I don't feel like I'm watching Rosario Dawson play Natural Rivera. I feel like that's her. I feel like that is a living, breathing character, and that's true for everyone that is in this movie. And then it was just like I said at that time. Of course, 9/11 affects you uh just because you have empathy as well, like even if you weren't in the area or like you weren't directly connected to it, but it made me feel things about that in a completely different way as well. And like everything about it just really stuck with me, from like the characters, the acting, the writing, the score especially, which I know I'll talk about a little bit later because I think it's a very underrated piece of movie music that did not get the attention that it deserved at all. um but I think that I actually Kurt is someone that we both know from like cinephiles. So we were messaging one time um about 25th Hour, and
Oh, I didn't know he was a
why
fan.
why I think I like 25th Hour a lot is because a lot of people accuse Spike Lee sometimes of having an agenda with some of his movies, where there's like, oh, like here's the message, right? Um, I think what I
Yeah,
like about this movie is that there is no agenda. There's nothing you can accuse him of being like, here's what he's trying to drive home.
it was a
Even
simple
if you want,
story.
yeah, even if you want to talk about the New York stuff and including 9/11 and talking about Bin Laden and stuff like that, I don't think it's forced. It's just a natural. That's the world the characters were living in at the time, and like I feel like there's no agenda, and that's why I think the story still resonates and still works, because I think he kind of took a step back and just was like, I'm going to tell this story as it should be. He really loved the book. He didn't really want to change like a ton from the book. It's funny, there's certain things that were like in the book that weren't originally in the script, and he was like, yo, why is this not in the script? Like that's
You
like a
read the
really
book
good part of
before?
the I read it after I saw the movie, and then
That's the first to do. I want to see the
and
changes.
yeah, and then like listening to the commentary, there's like one big scene that's in the book that he left out of the script originally, and Spike Lee and Edward Norton were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! Why is this not in there?" And like when we get to it, I'll tell you exactly what it is. But yeah,
Okay.
it's still one of those movies that's still like I still call it my favorite movie. Like it's still one that still like I watched it again last night just for this, and I still get legit chills and
Yeah,
goosebumps during parts of it. Like it still has the same effect on me now as it did 20 years ago when I first saw it. And imagine seeing it as a 20 years ago when you like are going to film school and you're like, this is what I kind of want to make or something I need, like this is what I want to
yeah,
feel or make people feel. And yeah, that was what that movie did for me back then and continues to do for me now, which is why I'm happy we can talk about it 20 years later and hopefully get more people to check it out and get more eyeballs on it, um, because it definitely deserves a lot more attention uh, than it probably even gets now, I think.
yeah. Like I said, like you nailed it at the beginning. So like I do, like I even mentioned in my read because I already have read, but I was like, I like if you would have asked me like 10 years ago, I would have said like this is his most underrated film, and I still kind of do feel that way. But a lot more people are discovering, and also helps that David Benioff created Game of Thrones.
Game
So I'm
Thrones, yeah,
obviously sure that people, oh, let me see, what he was reading. Like you find out, oh, he wrote Stay, he wrote Troy, I
yeah,
believe he wrote the Chiron as well, if I'm not
yep,
mistaken. So it's like, it's like I'm pretty sure a lot of people are discovering through that. But and then regarding the thing you said about the favorite movies is that is true because a lot of people, it's like with anything when it comes to musicians, like people need to understand, like because you use the argument like my favorite movie of all time is Terminator 2. Like I have a
yeah,
pretty good one. It's it's the greatest action movie of all time. But like, and do I think is one of the 10 greatest movies of all time. No, but it's just my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, that people need to know that favorite and best are two different things. Like you said, like I saw T2 for the first time. It was early 90s. It was through VHS. Just as a little kid, just Arnold was the coolest dude. It's like freaking unstoppable. So it's like, like a lot we tend to resonate with movies. I always find that like people that say that their favorite movie is so and so, a lot
Yeah.
of times it tends to be because it resonates with them or just the time in their life that they saw it. Doesn't mean that it's the best. Like I said, I'm like, yeah, Citizen Kane is considered the greatest movie of all time. I
Yeah.
understand the reason it is, but
But
you just
it's
pick
not gonna sit with you though, right? You're gonna be like, oh,
yeah, like
okay, cool.
it's like okay, like it's freaking about a rich guy in politics. Like I'm sorry, resonate more with, let's say, like Cinema Paradiso, which is in my top five favorite movie of all time. It's an Italian movie about a little kid that he falls in love with cinema through his friendship with a projectionist. I
Yeah.
resonate with that because I'm a kid that has loved films since I was a little kid. So
Yeah.
it's like I hate when people, because I get that stuff like, oh, why is American history? Because American, like I said, American history is my top 10 too. Oh, why is this movie about a Nazi person? And over,
In your
they say
top 10.
Star Wars. I'm like, I love Star Wars, but it just the emotions and American history. I said more. It's like, so those conversations, like when you said like, oh, G is naming it right now, like this is because movie is your favorite movie. Like I said, 24 Hours is. I love that you said that because it's like for him, it's like I know it has to be like you have to have a connection for as to why it's your favorite movie. Just like I said, like we were both alive and able to be alert for 9/11. Like I'm from
Yeah.
New York. I'm born and raised. I still live here. Like I remember when 9/11 happened. I was in third grade. Sorry, G, making you feel old again.
Oh, again.
I was in third grade, and it was like, and I remember like because we're little kids, they weren't going to tell us, oh, a terrorist blew up a building, or whatever the case may be. They were just
Yeah.
everybody. They started taking all of us out of school, and I mean, out of class, and then they took us something, and everybody's parents were picking them up. I didn't know nothing that happened until I got home, and that was the only thing that was in the news. So,
Right.
like, like seeing this movie, obviously, like when I saw it in 2003, I understood and stuff. But being older, I see the message, and I remember, like I have like flashbacks. You could say like, oh, I remember how 9/11, how New York was after 9/11. It was like it felt like like the city had lost a big part of their identity. Like
Right.
that was a big tourist attraction for New York. It was a huge thing. Like I said, like you said in the beginning, it was like obviously it was a whole thing that hit the whole country hard, because it's literally still one of the saddest things I've ever seen happen in my lifetime. But
Right.
in New York, it was like such a big, like a big deal because it was like, it was like it really hit New York hard.
Yeah.
So like that this movie has always hit me because of that, just the fact that I'm from New York. So
Right.
I resonated a lot with the pain that people were in the movie are suffering and like how it was, especially. Oh, we're gonna talk about the monologue later, right?
Yeah. 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 For
Okay, so
sure. Where want to get there?
I'll
Yeah.
leave some things to say about it. Okay.
Yeah. I do want to talk like a little bit about the main opening scene. Because I have a few friends that always are like, "What's the point of the opening scene with him rescuing the dog with Kotsia, who is played by
Yeah, that's
Tony Siragusa, who actually passed away in June of this year. He played for the Baltimore Ravens and actually does a really good job in this movie, considering he has no like real like acting background and is acting with
yeah.
like Edward Norton. And I'm sure Edward Norton at that time was, I wouldn't say a perfectionist. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Edward Norton about him being him being difficult to work with, but I think the more I hear those stories, I'm like, maybe he was just passionate about the craft and just wanted to
Yeah,
take it
exactly.
seriously.
You could tell those stories of just a passionate person who, I mean,
Because
is he a little narcissist? Yeah,
he might be, yeah, but he comes from like
detachment.
he comes from the like theater and like like a lot of them are a little different when it comes to like how they approach the work.
Yeah,
Um,
they take the
but
craft very
I did
serious.
I did respect on like the audio commentary that he gave him kudos for like just being really good in it, and because he is pretty top notch considering he had like no real acting background. Um, but I think when my friends ask me what's the point of that, I think because when we have to get to know Monty and find out like what he did and the type of drugs he was dealing, that
Yeah,
saving the dog gives you a little bit of like empathy towards him, that he has like uh a nature in him to want to protect and want to like help something or someone that's in need. I think that's the reason that opening scene is there at the start because you're gonna learn these things about him that could possibly make him unlikable to the audience. I think, um,
Yeah.
because like honestly, I guess I never paid attention to what the drugs were for a while, but until I listened to the commentary and like I didn't really put together that it was heroin. I assumed it
Oh,
was
but
like yeah, yeah, and then like it
no,
so
I mean,
that
when
he
I
was
first saw it, I'm pretty sure I thought it was coke too.
yeah, I thought it was coke, but I mean, and he was dealing heroin and like and you have to you have to sympathize with the main character that was doing something like horribly wrong. So they have to do a lot to like make you care. And I think that opening scene does a lot. And then of course his interactions with the girlfriend and the friends uh eventually kind of solidifies that. But that's why I've always thought that opening scene was there because I know for some people it might feel like, well, what was the point of that? What to the
And it,
greater
and it,
aspects
and
of
it
the
makes
story?
and it makes the scenes, every time he's walking the dog have more meaning because
Right.
their backstory. Because if we had never got that thing, okay, it's the guy that loves his dog. But
Yeah.
when you
Right.
see, I love that scene. Like everything you say, you nailed it. But it's also love it because it's like like it makes those scenes with the dog throughout the movie. It's like, okay, like he literally rescued him, and like he's like 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 you perfectly know like you feel empathy for him. It's like like oh he loves this dog. Like you also got to think about oh he's not gonna see his dog for 7 years.
Years.
Probably when he
Yeah.
comes out, who knows if
The dog will be
the
alive.
dog might be
Yeah.
dead. So it's
Yeah.
like I love that. It's like you don't. It's a nice touch to get a whole backstory of how in a movie like this about like a drama where we're following the last day of a drug dealer. You wouldn't think we'll get a backstory of how he got his dog.
Right.
So
Right.
I like those touches because it makes it stand above just like like there's a bunch of movies where there's like oh a drug dealer is contemplating like the mistakes he made in his life about the past or like should he have sold the drugs. So those touches I like those. It's great and then like I like when there's I feel like it doesn't always work but when a novelist adapts their own novel I feel like when changes are made or anything like that, like I feel like it's more understandable because it's like because sometimes writers just like when they do a play to a movie, they understand certain things that just work better in cinema. Like reading that scene probably doesn't work as good as it does on film.
Right. I agree. I think so too. And you hit the nail on the head too, which is why that scene goes a long way to solidify the bond that he has with Doyle and like how like giving up the dog when he has to go to prison is going to be really hard as well
Yeah,
because that is his companion and like uh yeah, so that scene is important for all those reasons as well. Um since the opening credits thing does happen after this, I want to talk about the 9/11 stuff as a whole uh throughout the movie because it starts with that opening title sequence which has the lights
incredible.
which represented the towers
The
as a
towers, yeah,
as a memorial of where they stood and it's it's a very, I mean, probably it's one of the best opening credit scenes I've ever seen. It's purely emotional. It has a lot to do with Terrence Blanchard's score. Like his opening titles for that sequence are amazing, and I love that at the start of it you can't quite tell what's going on. Like it's just like the beaming lights and like over like the cast names and
yeah.
stuff
Like
like
when I
that.
was watching it with my wife, I'm like, you get what he's trying to do. They're like, yeah, yeah, because she watched. This was the first time also watching it when I rewatched it a few days ago. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you get what the thing? Like, yes, babe. I did. Like, I'm like, of course, you're in New York. I'm like, super. I was saying like, because sometimes people don't pay attention to the opening credits until the words start happening.
Yeah.
So I wanted her to pay attention. I'm like, you know what this mean? I'm like, yes, yes, okay, just making sure.
Yeah. Uh and then like I love when it kind of just pans out and there's just a wide shot where you just see finally what it is and then the score just like explodes and it's got so much emotion behind it. Spike Lee said that Terrence Blanchard did the music in England and they wanted to track down, I guess he said there was a Sting song out and he couldn't remember what song it was that had this kind of like Arabic kind of guy singing over it and he wanted something similar because he wanted like basically almost like sound like the cries of like the city, and that is kind of what it
Oh,
sounds like, and that's what it's completely sticks with you, and it's the first taste of like, okay, we're gonna be living in a movie where this is like the backdrop. I mean, like Edward Norton made a good point in the commentary where he was like, yeah, there have been movies made about the event and about, he mentioned World Trade Center and stuff like that, but like this is always going to be on the peripheral of the story, and but it's also juxtaposed to, like what like particularly the main character is going through, like the city is in this like really melancholy state because of what happened, and then this lead character is also in a really melancholy state because this is
Yeah,
his last day,
crossroads in his life.
yeah, his last day of freedom, and how he, reflecting on all the mistakes he made to get there, and he was like, it was just a perfect, he was like, he was just really happy that Spike Lee did it. Spike Lee asked permission to shoot that lighting installation. They said, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, but I mean, Spike, like nobody's
Yeah,
besides Scorsese and Woody Allen, nobody's more synonymous with New York filmmaking than him. Like I said, like he was the perfect director for this movie. The only one that I could have maybe seen and I would have loved would have been Scorsese, but he was too busy with Gangs in New York. And
New York, yeah,
this feels more like a Spike movie, like
yeah,
because of like the character study of it.
yeah, and like, you also get that sense again later in the movie where like, when Francis, and then God, why am I blanking on Philip Seymour Hoffman's name when I just watch it? Oh, Jacob, when they're just sitting, talking right at his window, and it's right where like Ground Zero is, and like
Yeah,
it kind of hit home to me listening to the commentary when like Spike Lee said that we filmed that just them at the window live, and he was like, you have to understand that they were still searching for people and stuff while we shot this. Like it was still
no,
very
yeah,
much
it was a
like
long process.
a long process. So he was like, but he's like, but that's what I wanted. He's like, I wanted it to feel like this is real. This is where they're living, and you know, it's also interesting too because in that scene they're talking a lot about nothing at first, about just about like, oh, just about like how's the air up here because of like,
Yeah, like
all that stuff,
a regular
because
conversation with two
because
friends.
all the stuff that happened with 9/11, is it good to stay here, blah blah blah, and then it transitions into more talk about Monty, and then like the more intense that conversation gets, the more you're kind of focusing on what's going on down below. It's like these things are like completely playing off of each other, and that's why I think it's so good that he decided to go with his instinct to not ignore that real life event and just make it a part of the movie without it like completely overtaking the movie, because I don't think it ever completely
No, yeah, like
overtakes.
it's just he sprinkles it just enough that he didn't want to, like you said, like he didn't want to like just make it an afterthought. He wanted to really capture because I'm pretty sure Spike put a lot of the pain he was going through, because he repped New York like nobody else in the
Yeah,
world. So no, I'm pretty sure he tried to like inject some. I mean, is Edelman from New York or no? Okay, I don't know if he is.
you know what, I don't know. I'll look that up right now while we're talking. Let's see.
Yeah, because I'm like, if he
Oh, he's
isn't,
from,
I could
you know
tell
what,
that Spike probably.
he's from Boston.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, so
A Boston guy making one of the greatest New York
this
movies.
movie,
Crazy.
yeah, yeah, crazy, yeah,
No, but I can imagine Spike probably like trying to get him in that mind. I mean, it's like you said, it was a thing that hit the whole country hard. But I could
right,
tell, like I could see like Spike really like trying to do some psychological directing, like getting him in the mindset of how it hit New York specifically. Because that's just like I had to ask you that because I'm like the way Edward Norton portrayed the character is like it looked like it was real life pain regarding certain things.
right. I agree. Um, and like you get it throughout, like you said, it's sprinkled throughout the movie. It's really prevalent in the opening title sequence, really prevalent in the scene where they're sitting outside the window or out, like looking out the window to Ground Zero while they're having their conversation about Monty. um you get it a bit more in the infamous fuck you monologue montage. There's like some of it in there,
That stuff is great.
and then you get some more sprinkles of like just the passion and love for New York during the in Brian Cox like narration that kind of ends uh the
That's
movie.
an incredible
So
montage.
there are like
Yeah.
four really big kind of sequences where 9/11's touched on, but it's always there. Like the city is always a character throughout the whole movie, and it works as being juxtaposed to what's going on with Monty. Like this is like they're in this state of like sadness, but then there's like, is there kind of hope to rebuild, redemption, all this other stuff? Like, where do you kind of go from here after you've been hit with such like a tragic event. And of course, his life event is not nearly as bad as what happened in real life to New York, but it's like the same idea of how is life going to change and how are we going to recover from all this stuff that we've been going through. Um, but yeah, I'm just so happy that he did it. And like like I said, I think Spike Lee is a perfect choice for it. Scorsese, I think would have been an interesting choice too, to touch on
Yeah, he
it.
definitely.
But I think Spike Lee was the right person. Um, and I think it all kind of Edward Norton and Spike Lee kind of were like running at the same time in different ways to do this movie. Now, originally Tobey Maguire bought the rights and stuff to do
Yeah,
this.
I'm glad he mentioned that.
And I on the commentary they weren't sure if he wanted to star in it. I kind of think he maybe wanted to star in it.
No, no, no. Yeah, it was. I think he got busy with. No, no.
Spike
He got either
was
busy
it
with the first Spider-Man or Seabiscuit. It was one of those two because
those two,
that's the two things he was working on. But
right?
I'm like, I love Toby, but
I
besides
can't see. I can't
brothers,
see it. I
he has
can't
never
see
shown
him
me. He has never shown me. Yeah,
like grit.
it's like, look, he's too little. And like
Yeah,
Monty looks like a menacing guy that remember he's a drug dealer. No offense,
right.
little Toby Maguire short person being a drug dealer like doesn't bring
Yeah,
fear.
I can't see it either.
Like
Yeah,
I don't
I
know,
mean,
and then I could have seen him bringing those emotions. At least not yet. Like I said, the only movie that I've ever felt that showed me that he could have
was
played a
Brothers.
character like Monty is Brothers.
Yeah,
Besides that, the only movie that really like oh shit, he could act.
yeah. And but he did stay on as a producer, so he was involved. Apparently, he was on set a few times as well. Um, but Edward Norton had I got like I guess a package of the script and the book, and at the same time there was a couple of years whenever He Got Game came out, he saw that and wrote Spike Lee a letter about how powerful that movie was
Yeah,
to
he
him,
wanted to work.
and he wanted to work with
He
him
wanted to
really
work with him.
bad. And then it kind of ended up coming into fruition with this, and it's kind of like perfect, like full circle moment for them to work together. Um, I'm glad it ended up being Edward Norton because I think Edward Norton is perfect for this part. Edward Norton, especially back then, was a chameleon dude. I mean, I think he still kind of is, but he could bounce around
Like
playing
just
so
look
many
at
different types of
his
people.
2002 is so
It's
different.
ridiculous. So he had just he said on the commentary he had just shot Red Dragon and then went into this, and him and Philip Seymour Hoffman together actually. Um,
Yeah, I'm glad you
and
mentioned that. It was like a great. I always make that connection. It was like but 2002 they did two movies together
yep,
and it's like completely different
different,
parts.
completely different. Um, but they talked about how they shot this in 36 days, which is pretty quick for a movie like this. But they said they had a lot
We
of
thought more
like
days for sure.
they said they had a ton of rehearsal time beforehand, which is why they had the relationships and scenes and stuff kind of down to a T, basically.
Not bad.
Um, um, I love like just leading up to getting to introduce some of the characters. I love when he goes on his initial walk. Like you're starting in places where you're going to end up later in the movie. Like he walks through that little like under that little space where him and Frank, where he tells Frank to like
Yeah,
make him ugly. He walks under
that's
there.
Central Park.
Yeah, and then he walks through
I
the same.
smoked weed a lot there, G. That's what I know.
So like then he walks down the street where he's coming back from that, and Natrell runs into him, and they go back to the house. Like all the stuff that he starts at the movie where he's walking with Doyle are places that we kind of end up in
Yeah, no, you mentioned
eventually
yeah.
when the movie wraps up. Um, but one of the first places he goes to is the school, and that's when we end up getting introduced to Philip Seymour Hoffman's character and Anna Paquin's Mary D'Anzio, who you know what feels when I remember when I first saw the movie, feeling like she was pointless, right? But then once you kind of like get older and you're like watching it, it's not just Montgomery's story either, though. Like this is a day in the life of like all of them.
Mhm.
So like I mean, so like the stuff with her and Jacob, him being her teacher, and like the kind of weird feelings he has for her, like it might seem like okay, this is a really meaty thing to the main plot, but we are just in the day in the life of like all these people. So you're just getting
Yeah, it makes you
a
you have to
snapshot,
understand the characters.
right? You're just getting a snapshot of who they are, and like, and I thought this when I first watched it about Jacob, and then later when we meet Frank, that like and they even mentioned this on the commentary that like Philip Seymour Hoffman was like, I kind of feel like Jacob and Frank are only friends because they're friends with Monty. And like, yeah, maybe we all kind of grew up together, but Monty
Yeah,
is
for
the glue
sure.
that kind of held us together. Like Jacob and Frank wouldn't be friends otherwise if not for their relationship with Monty. And that really does show in how like even though I think it's cool too that Monty has genuine interactions with both of them though. He has like
Yeah, like he has a different friendship with both of them. Like
yeah,
is that I mean you pretty have I'm pretty sure you have it pretty we all have it where it's like
with different people,
you
yeah.
have yeah it's like you have like it's different like I have two brothers. There's one that I mainly talk sports with, and then there's one that I can really talk deep dive like about life stuff. Like when I was preparing to get married, he's married, so I was talking to him about that. Like so it's like just like with family or friendship. Like we all have different relationship, like a different type of friendship or sibling relationship with people, and it's just the same. Like sometimes, like I have a lot of lifelong friends, and like
Yeah.
we all went through our some stuff. Like I'm doing my thing. Some of my other friends are like cops. I have some friends that have been to jail for criminal activities, but at the end of the day, we grew up together, so we're still very tight. And, we have
Right.
affinity, but we it's like we're still friends, even though despite our completely different lifestyles because we grew up together. So that's how I feel
Right.
like it is. Like you said, like it is with them too. Is like they grew up together, and even though their lives are completely, because you have a Wall Street asshole, you have a teacher who has a
Teacher.
weird
Infatuation.
prejudice that
Infatuation with his dark
yeah,
with his student.
that
Yeah.
R. Kelly line hits funny.
Yeah. And then you have their
Like R.
drug
Kelly
dealer
hits
friend.
like yeah. It's like three different friends, but through that connection of growing up together, stuff like that, they still make it work despite their issues.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's good, like when we set up with like Jacob, that you could tell. I mean, you would get why Monty and Frank would be friends, even though that like
Yeah, exactly.
Frank ended up being like successful in its own right, but like they have more in sync with their personality, right? Um, but I like that they have like those kind of early scenes with Jake, like when he goes to school. There's another one later in the club where he like talks about him wanting him to take care of Doyle, like because he's the Doyle like other than Naturel
He's the one.
only
He's like he's
that
like he's
like
like, he's
doesn't
like
like
Barry
Frank.
Pepper now.
Yeah, doesn't like Frank, but like
Like
love,
Frank now.
yeah. And I also love how it sets up how different they are because when he tries to call Frank while he's at work about the night, he basically is like, "Hey," he basically trying to talk to him like, "What's going on?" And like Frank like hangs up on him because he's busy doing all his Wall Street shit. So like it kind of sets the tone already. Like, oh, this is what kind of happens. Like Jacob is a little bit of the pushover, a little bit of the like introvert.
But he's that
Um,
friend you kind of need. Like
but yeah,
he's
he's
like
reliable.
he'll be the dependable one. He'll visit him in jail
Yeah,
probably. While Frank will be like, "Yo, sorry, Monty, couldn't see you. Like I got too busy with work and
yeah.
women."
Yeah. And since the kind of flirtation starts at the school, what are your thoughts on like I mean, do you agree that like including the stuff with the students just to show like a snapshot of like what his character a day in this character's life like because it's not really important to the overall
Yeah,
plot, but like it
yeah,
but yeah,
because
like what do
like
you think
like
about it?
like when they when they like crack jokes at him in the club, about he wants to hook up with his student and all that stuff. It
Yeah.
shows him being kind of that weak kind of man that Philip Hoffman was so good at playing on Scotty J and Boogie Nights and all those characters that
Yeah.
he was so good at playing these characters that you kind of felt for them,
Yeah.
but it's like there was just a quirk about them that made them weak men. So I feel like that was a good thing because it's like you could tell that he knows it's morally wrong to
Yeah.
have fantasy and even look at your student that way. So I like there's some people that will probably say like, oh, why, like why include that he has a thing for his teenage student, but like he never really acted on it per se. So it's like I feel it was a good inclusion because one, it also gives a backstory of how Monty's life could have been so different when he brings up the fact that he was the assist leader, he was in the basketball team, he got
Yeah.
kicked out, and it all went down. Like, what would have happened if he had his head straight and like kept going about stuff? Maybe he would have been in the NBA instead of being a drug dealer. So that scene is good
Right.
for many different reasons.
I also think it's interesting too because I think it also shows Monty's lack of judgment towards Jacob because like one of the conversations they have at the club about the student was when he said basically like like well don't do it now but like pretty soon like she'll be like 8 or however old she was, and that's basically
Predatory behavior.
yeah. But that's basically the age that Naturel was when Monty met her, and he like that's how he kind of like talks to him about it.
Because
He doesn't judge him as far as like Frank kind of makes fun of him for it, where Monty is more like, no, like dude, like don't think of it that way. Like if you wait, maybe you'll have this situation like I have with like Naturel and like whatever. I think that also goes along to kind of show like what their friendship is like as well. I think it's interesting that Brittany Murphy was supposed to play this part, by Anna Paquin
the
character.
Anna Paquin, but
Yeah,
she
but
was an aim out or something.
she dropped out. They would say why that she had dropped out of it. Anna Paquin got cast last minute, but they said the positive thing was that she had just done a play with Philip Seymour Hoffman, so they were all already had like a rapport with each other,
So they
which
already
is
had
why
that
I think
chemistry.
yeah, which is why I think their scenes are really good together. Like that initial scene in the classroom where she comes back about talking about that kid's paper about his grandmother dying and how like
Yeah.
and how when you gave him an A+ and said like it was very powerful, it was very moving and like all that other stuff. Like that whole scene it plays so well because they play off of each other uh really well. And there's
And
this
she looks
weird
more
like
believable as a high school student
as a high school
than
student, I think
Brittany
at
Murphy.
that
Come on, it
time, I
was
think.
seven years after Clueless. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, you still can't be freaking being, But she did aim out that same year. Like, it's like
Yeah, yeah.
Anna
Yeah.
Paquin. I
I
think
don't
what's
think I could
Anna
have
Paquin way more believable.
I don't think I could have bought it, and I could, Anna Paquin very much looked high school age. I like that she kind of like toes the line of like it seems like a genuine conversation, but she's also flirting, and then he's just trying to figure out how he should talk to her, like if he's doing like
Yeah,
light flirting with her,
this should be tricky.
yeah, and then of course she
Like,
storms
what
out
can I
when he
say not to
doesn't,
get fired?
yeah, and she storms out when he doesn't agree to change her grade, but like, we of course get more out of them later, and rightfully so we meet Frank doing his job on Wall Street. I love that scene just because the dialogue of him interacting with some of his coworkers are
That guy
hilarious.
that Spike uses all the time, his balls.
Oh yeah, when he's
Like,
like
that was
telling him like
perfect.
yeah that
That is
guy's
a
guy's
true New
perfect.
Yorker. That
Yeah,
is a true New Yorker.
and then when he's talking to the character's name is Marcuse, but it's Aaron Stanford who the one that like pesters him for like 2 seconds. That guy was in X2 with Anna Paquin
Yeah,
eventually.
like,
So yeah, it's just a good scene to introduce him to kind of the world that he lives in, and
yeah, because it shows, like, it kind of explains like his later action and why he is how he is. Like, I've met Wall Street people. They could be douche. They could be douche. They could
yeah,
be assholes sometimes.
and like we kind of learn a little bit later that he hides behind a lot of alpha male bravado, uh, mostly because he's scared, especially when it comes to his friend. When it comes to his friend going away for 7 years, and also thinking about like all the things that he could have done to maybe have prevented that if he had like spoken up about some
Yeah,
stuff. But yeah, I'm glad that you kind of meet him here. And Barry Pepper, who I think is from Canada,
best performance.
yeah, I've tried. I mean, I've seen him in other stuff that I thought he was good in, but like
Yeah,
I'm so surprised that this didn't make him bigger, bigger. I guess like he kind of like I guess
it's like he has a very distinctive look that works for a
yeah,
certain character.
yeah, that's true. That's
Like
true.
nowadays, he usually plays like assholes or bad guys or crooked cops. I believe he was crooked cop in Snitch or Broken
Yeah,
City, one of those movies. He's like he has a very distinctive look. It's
yeah,
like, so it's like with him, it's hard. Like, he can't be a romantic lead. He's a
yeah.
character actor,
He's gonna be a character
so it's
actor.
like it's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
I mean,
And
at
then
least he bounced back from Battlefield Earth.
yeah, oh, thank God, thank God, thank God, dude. And then after we get introduced to him, of course we get introduced to Naturel, and what I love about their early scenes together is that there are conversations they're having where they're talking about one thing, but there's like this unspoken thing that's going on in the background where he clearly, we learn is doubtful of her because he thinks that they put it in his head that like she may have been the one that knocked him out, which is why he's going away for 7 years. And
I wouldn't be surprised,
right,
honestly.
yeah, and I know, and like, but what's interesting though? Even from the first time I saw it, I never thought it was her. I always got a genuine vibe from her about like, like she seemed like she would never do something like them. She seemed like insanely loyal from like the moment you first see
I feel
them
like
interact.
her face went when my man shit.
No, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
your face, you could tell. You could, yeah. I love that. It was like anytime
Yeah,
he sees in a movie, I'm like, you have to. Like when he said it in the Five Bloods, I got so happy. I'm like, I don't
yeah.
like that. You can't make him. You have
It's
to
his
put him in the
signature.
movie.
It is his signature for sure. But yeah, I mean, I love their scenes because there's a conflict with him, right? He loves her, clearly loves her, but he's like
She loves him
towing the
too.
line of like, how do I like? I don't know if I can trust her, and then it kind of like results in these kind of like I felt that argument where she's like, Montgomery, why don't you talk to me? And then like he's not really like giving her what she needs, and then they're trying to figure out the night, and he's like, he's like, no, this is not going to be your last night. This is my last night. Like you can continue to go out with your friends and do all this. And she was like, no,
Yeah,
this
she
is
has a
like,
good head on her shoulders.
yeah. But then she's like, no, this is about you and me. This is our last night. And then that's
Exactly.
when
It's
he
like
makes a comment about, I have to go see my dad. Like that's important too. And that kind of like shuts her down a bit. But like, I don't know. I kind of felt like I felt bad for her actually through most of the movie until he realizes that he could have trusted her the whole time. Uh, she's just kind of like
yeah,
trying to
because
figure out
that's
how to be there for him.
his
And I know that,
method. His method
and
is too much.
she like knows that he doubts her, and she's still there,
Yeah,
and she's still willing to be there. Um, I like that you brought up the whole scene with the DEA agent because that is, I mean, of course, that signature line is really funny. Um, it's also one of I think two scenes with him and Naturel before things go awry where you kind of see the connection a bit, like the scene with him in the bathtub. Like you have to get enough to like realize that like
yeah, that was a great scene.
why they might be into each other. You get it later. Actually, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is this scene on the playground when they flashback to when he first meets her. It's such a genuine, like really well written, like kind of meet cute kind of scene. Um, but like,
It starts off kind of weird at first
it
because
does start
she's
off
like,
weird. It starts off weird, but then like you kind of instantly feel the like chemistry between them, like
yeah, like
right
yeah, they
away.
have that. Her, I would love to see them in a movie because they really do have natural chemistry in this movie. Like they could play a couple again because it's just
Yeah, and
like
that's
you saw
all
like
Edward.
you
Yeah,
like
that's. Oh yeah, go ahead.
no no so like even though I think that there's a part that maybe she could have been the one to rat him out, like
Yeah,
as a lesson or just doubting, but I also don't feel that she is because like the scene when they find the drugs and you see her face, she's like she knows exactly what was gonna happen, and she's
happened. Yeah,
like, "Are you kidding me?" Like we were just talking about kids, and all that's pretty much just got taken
well,
from
taken
us in
away.
a way.
Yep, just completely taken away. And and I love the build up to them finding it. That guy is just like he knows exactly where the drugs are, and he's like, "Oh, do you mind if I sit down? Like, you mind if I sit down right here?" And
To
he's like,
me,
"What's
that's so
wrong?"
stupid. It's like,
He's like, "What's wrong with this couch? It's kind of lumpy." Like he's going all like
yeah,
this.
and you can only imagine, like, all of a sudden they took out, like, you would know right away if something's up with those couches.
Yeah,
Because all that money, that drug, like, that would be so, like, like, it would make the couch, like, not even, those type of couch, like, I've had those type of couches. Those type of couches are supposed to fluff down so easy when you sit on them. They're not supposed to be tight. So,
yeah.
as a DA, you'd be like, oh, he definitely got something up in
He
here.
got something here. Also, another good example of Terrence Blanchard's score. It like builds dread during that scene of like what
Yeah.
they're about to find, and and then you kind of read it on Edward Norton's face, like because that's when he's like, just get it over with. I know
Yeah,
you know it's there,
it's like, come on,
and like you said,
it's like anytime.
yeah, and like
No,
you
it's like
said, like
anytime, like when you know
her
something's
face
good.
too, like when she like kind of looks down, like
Yeah,
yeah, she knows right then that her life is over as well. Uh,
as it
Now,
was.
if you were to believe that like she was the one to narc him out, I guess that look down could be like, "Oh, I betrayed him," kind of thing. And I guess you could read it
Yeah,
that
she don't
way.
want to look in his eye.
But I kind of just read it that like she knew her life was over, like their lives were
Same.
over, like in that moment, like it wasn't gonna be the same for them anymore. After that, and of course that carries on into the tension of the present, where like um there's just like their relationship isn't quite what it was, but I do like before he leaves the house after that argument they have about like you know lately you can't even look me in the eye and all that stuff, and he just tells her to wear that silver dress. Like it's like he still has this like you know love for her where he's like can you please do that for me,
It's
like
complicated.
yeah, it's a very complicated relationship that where he's like I think you did this. I don't want to believe you did this. I still have a lot of love for you. Like
I
it's
want
a
to see
real.
the good in you.
And like I said, I think it's written so well where they're like they could be talking about one thing, but like there's stuff that's just like all
Yeah.
the elephant in the room that's not being discussed in like most of their scenes together. Um, and then of course he leaves and he meets his dad, played by Brian Cox. Brian Cox not in the movie a lot, but very strong presence. Uh,
Just the perfect amount.
I think he's in like two main scenes, right? He's in the like the that
Mm,
introduction
the
scene,
bar
and then
scene.
the scene where he picks him up, and then he has that whole ending narration at the end.
Yeah.
Uh,
Three
but
key scenes.
yeah, but their scenes together, their initial scenes are really good. Yeah, I mean, because you have to buy into their like father son relationship right away, in a very short amount of time, and
And like it comes out believable.
yeah, and I like that like in the movie everyone's dealing with their own type of guilt when it comes to what happened with Monty. Monty has his own. Naturel has her own. I think hers is very similar to what Frank's is, where it's like maybe I should have did more to like dial him back to get him to stop. I think they all kind of feel that. I think his father is like, he was an alcoholic, right? Like there's all these other things that go back to the past of like, if I had done certain things differently, would you have ended up here? Um, but I love their relationship though. In like a short amount of time, you kind of feel like, because he lost his mother, so like only thing he has like is his father. So like, uh, Spike Lee made a good point in the commentary about like I love he like the relationship between fathers and sons on screen is sometimes not depicted the way it probably should be, and he's like I wanted to like really even in a short amount of time like show how honest this relationship was, even though it was complicated as well. Um, but again, one of those things where there's a lot of love there, and like uh, he feels a lot of guilt, and there's nothing he can really do about it.
You
As
got me
far as
excited
like
to look.
things.
I want to watch this movie with the commentary now because like
Oh,
all the
it's
things you're
yeah,
saying is like it's like damn. Like I own the DVD. I should watch it like that. Well, I
yeah.
mean the Blu-ray.
So
I should watch it like that.
yeah, and there's two commentaries too. There's one on the Blu-ray. There's one with just Spike Lee, and then there's one with Spike Lee and Edward Norton that they put on like a newer edition of it. So like,
Okay.
I tend to like if I listen to one, I like to hear two people like kind of riffing off each other. Um, but theirs is really interesting to listen to. Um, and then this is where we get the fuck you montage monologue, and that was what I wanted to bring out. This is something that's in his book. A lot of people thought because this is a very Spike Lee moment that Spike Lee kind
Oh,
of
okay.
came
So
up.
I would have thought it was a Spike Lee creation, honestly.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought it was. It's not. It's in the book. The only thing that's not really in the the only thing that's not in the monologue is like the Bin Laden stuff. The stuff that's more pointed towards nine
Yeah,
eleven. Um,
that's why I figured that it was a Spike thing because I know the book came out before 9/11, and then he mentions like because the racism involved in that, especially when it comes to talking about Muslims, stuff that feels more like that hatred
yeah,
that people had for Muslims after 9/11. So wow,
yeah.
it's part of the book. You got me excited to read this book now for sure.
Part of the book. But when he wrote the script, he left it out. So that was one of the things that him and Spike Lee and Edward Norton were like, "Well, where's this montage?"
Spike, like,
And
hey, what you
and
talking
then
about? That's the
he
best
asked him
part.
like why did you take it out? And I guess he said like, "Oh, I didn't think it was like cinematic enough." And like Spike Lee was like, "No, you let me worry about that and put it back in." So they put it back
That's
in.
the most
Thankful,
famous scene.
thankfully, and it. I mean, I remember the first time I saw it, I felt like I had never seen anything like that really
I can only
before.
imagine how it must have been in theaters to take
There's
all that in.
it was a huge like I remember our friends when it was over, we all kind of just had this collective like when it was over because that's how you kind of feel when it's done.
It
It
might be a
just
hot take, but I actually think this monologue is better than the one to do the right thing.
you know what I think
Like
I mean maybe I mean I think it resonates with me more.
yeah,
I think a
like
lot more.
because the both of them are trying to basically the theme of both of them is racism,
Right.
and the fact that you have one person delivering it to every single group does not matter. I'm Dominican, and I freaking laugh with the. Don't get me started on the Dominicans.
The KS.
I'm I know how to have fun with it because I always see people how they're easily offended like I'm I
No,
don't
all the
like how
jokes are
they
good.
talked about. I'm like, bro, that stuff has me cracking up. Fuck Puerto Ricans, 20 Puerto Ricans. As a New Yorker, I have literally seen. I one of my neighbors when growing up was a house of 11 Mexicans in one bedroom.
Yeah.
that stuff was so accurate about us Latinos. So yeah, when we talk about don't get me started with and then the little wink, I'm Dominican, I'll crack up like that's a funny line. Because
Yeah,
no offense,
it's so it's
that is
so
how that is how that is
it's
how white
so
people look at us in New York. So it's like to me, I'm like that's accurate. I'm gonna laugh about it because it's an accurate portrayal.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it and like what the monologue is like and like what you kind of learn, especially once he starts to talk shit about his actual friends and then his father. He's trying to
Fuck
blame
that proof
every
that
yeah, fucking show me up the river, fucking bitch. um,
and then the score. Oh my god, and that scene the
yeah,
score is so amazing.
yeah. So like, what the monologue is though is that he's blaming everyone else in that moment for what
But
got him to
himself.
where, but himself to what for what got him there, and that includes every race living in New York City, every
Oh
ethnicity,
yeah.
everyone there. Um, it's just so like I love how you mentioned the thing about the Dominicans because I love the line when he's like, "Fuck the Uptown Brothers. They never pass the ball. They don't want to play defense. They take 5 steps on every layup to the hoop, and they want to turn around and blame everything on the white man. Slavery ended 137 years ago. Move the fuck on." I remember so like most of my friends, of course, are like white. So during that whole scene, they're like looking at me like, "Is this okay?" But like, it's there's truth, right? Like it's like
Yes, that's why I don't
like
get mad.
that's why it's not like this is not a racist monologue at all. Like there is just like this is just someone who is just like
Angry at the
stereotypes
world.
angry at the world and then stereotypes exist for a reason. They're there. Like
Exactly.
right. So this is him being so mad about his situation that he is calling everyone out, blaming everyone. And I love what you said about the score because I love how it builds and builds and builds. And by the time it gets to where he's like, fuck this whole city and everyone in it, let earthquakes crumble it, let the fires rage, let it burn to fucking ash. And like that whole thing, that the score like gets better and better as it goes along. And and I love by the end of it, and it just stops, and then he finally is like, no, like fuck you, Montgomery Rowan. Like this is basically your fault. You had it all. You threw it all away. And he called himself a dumb fuck because in the end,
You are
he can only really blame himself. If there was going to
himself.
be an Oscar nominated moment for Edward Norton in that movie, I would be that. If you
Yeah,
know,
they're the sense of peace. Okay, which one might not get as sued?
yeah, I know, right? And like, but
And
it
what
is
clip?
his. I think it's his best moment in the movie. Um,
Oh, for sure. It's like it's
uh,
the most cinematic. It's the most powerful. It's the one that highlights Terrence Blanchard's amazing score. Because if
yeah,
he had been nominated, which he should have.
yeah. You know what?
That could have been like that the piece that would have been used.
Because there's a lot of. Let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about the score before we go any further. Because like we could talk about it at any point in the movie because the score is. Um, Edward
Very
Norton makes a
prevalent
good
throughout the
point.
movie.
Edward Norton made a good point in the commentary too that, and this is like this in a lot of Spike Lee movies. He said Spike Lee is not afraid where some people might think the score is intrusive. A lot of Spike Lee movies, the score is very prevalent, and it might be like too audible for some people to be like, "Wow, I'm trying to listen to the dialogue." But he's not afraid to do that, and he's not afraid to do that in this movie either, where like the music is very much like its own character too. I think and
Yeah,
you're
for sure.
but I think you're easily able to pay attention to what you're hearing music wise and what you're hearing dialogue wise too. It never like gets in the way of like uh the actual dialogue between characters. Like you never lose focus of like what's being said, but it does pack a huge emotional wallop. It's starting with that opening title sequence, coming up to the fuck you monologue.
The drive.
um, I love the quiet like during the playground sequence, like that piece of score is really good. And then the drive at the end that ends the movie, which is kind of like a culmination of like all the themes, I guess, from the
Yeah.
entire movie. Um, I know he got a Golden Globe nomination for his score. I don't know how he didn't get anything else. I This was like the first actual score I actually bought after when I first saw the movie. I actually
No, yeah, I
bought
know
this.
you
I
always
bought the
talked about the
CD,
score, honestly.
and like it's such a brilliant piece of music. I don't know if it just wasn't deemed like cinematic enough. Because Terrence Blanchard is like a jazz musician. He's not
Right.
like
I'm about to pull up who the hell I'm pretty sure like the pianist was nominated, but I want to see who the hell the other nominees were
he's
because
more.
This stuff is
Because
ridiculous.
it's a great piece of music. I think it's the best piece of music that he's done for Spike Lee's movies. I know he scored a lot of his movies. Um,
Yeah,
but I think
everything since Mo Better, if I'm not
Bo Butter
mistaken.
Blues, yeah, and even though Terrence Blanchard is a jazz musician, and I know I probably said they probably didn't think it was cinematic enough. This score is very cinematic, I think, in so many ways, and I'm just so surprised that like it didn't get the love
All right,
and
so it
attention it
was
deserved.
Road to Perdition, The Hours, get that shit the fuck out. Far From Heaven, get it the fuck out. Catch Me If You Can and Frida. So it could easily replace Far From Heaven or The Hours. The Road to
Or is
Perdition score is really good by Thomas Newman.
yeah, yeah,
Catch
it's
Me If
really
You
good.
Can, that score is iconic. And then Frida, which
Yeah,
one, is a really good score. But Far
sure.
From Heaven and The Hours, any of those could have
25th
been
hour,
replaced.
Terrence Blanchard could have been in any two of those spots. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
crazy to me.
the hours of Far From Heaven were kind of big Oscar movies, so they kind of make sense. And
I don't even
in
remember their
terms of
scores.
what we exactly like, Catch Me If You Can, when I remember, because it's like especially the intro is used so good, and then the Road to Perdition is my favorite Sam Mendes movie, which also had his 20th anniversary. Well, I mean, obviously they all do, but I remember I made a post about it. So oh, come on, like Far From Heaven and The Hours are Oscar bait movies. They're both good movies, but given what we know the Oscars would do, it's not too shocking.
Yeah,
But come
yeah.
on, those scores are not memorable at all. 24 hour could have easily had a spot in that right there.
Yeah, I agree. And then to anyone listening, I think if you're seeing the movie for the first time, that is going to be one of the things that
You
stands
take away
out to
from it.
you the most. I think the score is just very for a movie that feels like a very like kind of small drama. It has a very big score that never overpowers like the scenes or anything. I think it just adds to them. Uh, it's just like I think I don't I wish I could be in his head when he was doing it or like what it was that like maybe he connected with the story a lot, the characters and stuff. But it like I feel like he was kind of firing on all cylinders when he made uh all the music for
Yeah,
this
because I
movie.
feel like like they say, he understood the assignment. He knew that he was making a movie with a lot of pain, with anger, and like
Yeah,
you said, like the monologue that like as Monty's monologue is more aggressive, the score just becomes like more powerful and louder. Never taken away from what Monty says, like you said, but
yeah,
be serving the scene beautifully. Like it's like you hear the score, but you also hear the dialogue at the same time. Is you're never distracted. Like, oh, the score's slapping right now. I can't understand what Monty's saying, or like Monty's monologue is great, but it's also like not taken away from the score. Like it's just a perfect thing from dialogue and score where it doesn't have the Christopher Nolan problem that people have. Like, oh, the sound is overpowering the dialogue.
yeah. I agree. And so after all this stuff, we get more scenes with like Frank and Jacob, and this is only my interpretation of like why these scenes are included because I think I have friends that are like, well, they don't really necessarily drive the plot forward. This is like the scene at the Chinese food place, and then the start of the scene at the bar that they're meeting like everyone at before they go to the club. In
Yeah,
my mind, in my interpretation, I because we kind of talked about like the friendships between these, especially with all three of them, but especially these two. I think it kind of is showing the audience that like without Monty, they really have nothing to really. This isn't like a
yeah.
real
When
solid
Monty goes to
friendship.
jail,
Yeah, like, are you gonna let someone like Frank talk to you about how like you're in the 62nd percentile, and this is why like you don't get dates, and this is like you're not gonna let someone talk to you like that unless there's like a glue that kind of holds that together, and without that glue being there, I think those scenes are there to kind of show that they won't have much of a relationship without Monty being present because of how they interact with each other. It
yeah.
also goes a long way to show, like again, like Frank's bravado and how like he's hiding behind a lot of like uh he would say security, like very he thinks he's a very secure person, but he's not. Um, that's why I think those things are there and why they're like they may not drive like the whole plot forward, but I think like it kind of shows like where these
They
two
give a
could.
thing because like one
It's like context, yeah, basically about where they could
yeah,
be
because like once Monty
without him.
goes to jail, these people probably wouldn't. They'll probably be like when Jacob visits, be like, "Oh, I haven't seen Frank and so months."
Yeah,
So then he'll probably have Monty call him like, "Hey, what's going on?" Like Jacob he hasn't seen because like you said, like Monty is the glue that holds them together. Like these
yeah,
two. will not have be hanging out a lot after in those 7 years that Monty goes to jail.
Yeah. And like, you know what's interesting too? I think even Frank, I don't think he totally hates Jake. I think there's moments where he's like frustrated by him. Like the scene by the window, there's like the scene by the window where Jake is like, "Oh, I wish he could take Doyle with him and like to jail, the prison." And he looks at him, he's like, "You can't take a dog to the Who's Cow,
It's
Jake."
like,
Like, what are you
well, that's some
talking about?
idiotic shit to
And
say.
like, what's wrong with you? And then he kind of was like, "No, well, I know that, but I
Freaking
just saying that
rhetorical.
it'd be really nice if he could." And he kind of dials it back. He's like, "Yeah, I guess it would be nice if he could." And and then he rips into him at the Chinese restaurant after like after Jacob rips into him about like putting all the stuff in his hair like to kind of hide his gray and like talking about how much money he makes and all this stuff. And then he rips into Jacob about saying that he's ashamed of his wealth because he comes from money, and like he just really rips into him. And then they're both really quiet and like they aren't saying anything to each other. And I kind of feel like they both felt like they said things to each other that were like they went too far. And then that's when they bring up Monty again. Like, well, what's Monty? Like, where is he rank? And that's when Frank calls
Brought
him
up
a
donuts.
donut. He calls him a donut, a big fat zero. He's going to prison. Uh, Again, that's why I think those scenes are like really
Yeah,
important to the whole
it's like
narrative.
you for you to care about the friendship and to be invested about why he's friends with these people, you need little scenes. Like, don't get me wrong, I love when a movie like Tar where freaking the main characters in every scene.
Right,
But
right.
this is a story that you need to care about the supporting characters. This is not just about Monty, it's about how him going to prison is affecting his girlfriend, his father, his two best
Yeah,
friends. You need to invest in those characters, and Spike Lee and Benioff do a great job in that. Like,
yeah,
I'm not saying I care about Jacob and Frank to the extent that I care about Monty and about his the situation he's in. But it's okay. Like, I need to know why these people are friends. I need to know
right.
how their life are gonna change after the Rock leaves.
Right. And they still have some kind of cordial relationship because when they go to the bar where they're meeting him, even though he disguises it as his coworker Terry, he still tells him about the student that he's like infatuated with. He does try to hide it, being like, "Oh, there's this guy Terry at work, and he's kind of obsessing over this girl," and like he's like listening to him for a while.
That would be the ideal. So like, oh, my friend Mike
This thing,
thinks your cousin is cute. Like,
yeah, yeah,
is you.
it's
That's like
you.
the
And I love
that's
like he
like
pretends
storytelling
like
one
he's
of
like
one.
he's pretending like he's listening to him, and he's like, and he just interrupts him. He's like, "You haven't fucked her yet, right?" He's like, "What?" And then I like how he doesn't like hesitate. He's just like, "No, no, I haven't fucked her." And he's like, "Good."
I can't front. I've done it in the past where somebody's telling me a story and I just take one little thing and I said like, but so I, like I've been in that situation where it's like you hear me such a crazy story. It's like you just want to know the one answer. You don't care about everything
Yeah,
else.
and
You
then
just
he
want to
has
know
that
the
like
one answer.
he has that line. He's like, "Because there's something a grown man should not say when he walks into a Victoria's Secret store. Does this come in children's sizes?" And then they start arguing with each other. Like, see, this is what it was like. The Cliff Notes was like, "This is why I don't tell you shit." Kind of like, and they're like going like back and forth. And then of course that's when Naturel walks in. Great shot of Rosario Dawson walking in, and her signature and
Yeah,
her
it
silver
reminded me of
dress.
Belly.
Yeah, it's like we not now we know why Monty loves the silver dress so much. Because Rosario Dawson is just on top of being crazy talented, very beautiful girl. Um,
Has aged
this
incredible.
gracefully, by the way. This scene, even though I think all the scenes kind of depict how real these characters are, the scene where she gets there and she's talking to both of them, again, is one of those moments where I feel like I'm not watching three actors playing parts. Like they feel like
Yeah,
they have
you're
had a
watching real
relationship
real
with each
characters.
other. Like, when he's just riffing about the whole like why when I call a girl and like ask her like where she wants to eat, I have to stay on the phone an extra like 30 minutes. Like that whole like thing that he's so frustrated. And then he was like, and please like tell me like why do girls like feel the need to cry after having great sex? And they both just start laughing at him. And then they're like, he's like, what? And then she's like, no, you're just a sad fuck, Francis. Like the whole like riffing with each other back and forth is
Like
like genuine. Like it
that's that
really,
watching douchebag mentality. He Barry
yeah,
Pepper perfectly
yeah.
captured how those people are.
And then I think he's like, and then that's when Jacob was like, "Oh, I guess that knocks you out of like, was it the 90, like whatever percentile?" And then he tells her, "Oh, you missed a really good story about Jake's imaginary friend. It was great." And then he like looks at her like, like no. And then
Yeah,
like
the
any,
whole club scene is great.
and then like any like normal moment, like if you're like in a situation where the situation is kind of serious, like we're all here because of this thing, that whole riffing stops, and then Jacob asks Naturel like, how's his father doing, like how's Monty's father, and then it gets kind of serious, and then uh like where is he at, and then he's like, well, is he ever on time for anything, and then that's when Barry Pepper's like, well, he better be on time tomorrow, and then it kind of gets down. It's like a down conversation because like this is just the reality of like what they're in. And I love that scene probably more than they should, because I think it's just real. Like they go from like showing what they wore like as friends, like kind of riffing off each other and making fun of each other, but then there's like this weight that they have to kind of address, and they address it in a very like yeah, this is where we're at kind of thing, and then they have to kind of bounce back, and that's when he's like, yo, we got to keep the vibe up, the mood up, and then she makes that joke, was like, well, why don't you tell us some more sex stories, that should work, and like then it goes back to being like, okay, like now we're making fun of each other again. And then she leaves, and he makes that comment. He's like, "Oh, I know she cries after having great sex, man." and then and then Edward Norton walks in, and their interactions are so real too. That's what it's like when three buddies get together to kind of like hang out.
Yeah.
And then that moment that's so sad and so real for me too is when that bartender brings the three shots and says like, you should all come to my like birthday party this Sunday, and they all get quiet because it's like Monty's not gonna have this Sunday, and it's just so real, and she feels bad. She's like, oh, you don't have to come if you don't want to. She thinks it's about like them not wanting to come, and they're just kind of like
deeper.
It's a lot deeper than that. But I do love that it ends on that note of like, fuck Sunday. Like, like whatever, this is about.
Yeah, but that's another great scene. Because like he could have not even added that, but it is another scene where it's like reality hits, like, like this is really the last time that
we're gonna do this,
we're gonna be like this for a while.
Yeah.
Well, who knows for everything? You never know what happens in prison.
Yeah, and I think that runs throughout the whole movie too. It's like you don't know what's going to happen to him in prison. Something really awful could happen to him in prison, and then there's the whole just life changing over 7 years. Like there's all this talk from like Naturel, eventually later from Frank when you finally really see what he is upset about. That I will be there for you. Like when you get out, like there's no guarantees though, because a lot can change in 7 years, and I think that
Barry Pepper's character could easily be dead from drugs. Natural could just could be where Monty's just like, like, I love you, but I don't want you to, you're younger than me. I don't want you to, to just keep having your life on stop for me.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
There's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of things that we know will probably happen. It's like
right.
We've seen enough movies and shows where things like that happen, where it's like a character's doing a lot of prison time, and they just tell the girlfriend, like leave, especially in this situation when she's much younger than you. And like I said, with Barry Pepper's character, he's just the type of character you could see hearing that, oh, this person drug overdose, or like he got into bookies or something and he couldn't pay, because of his alcohol and drug addiction, he didn't have enough money to pay them back, and they kill him off. Like that's the story I have. That's the finish I have for Frank. That he doesn't make it out to when Monty comes out of jail. I think Frank is dead before those 7 years.
I think that too. I actually believe that too. I think like you can kind of tell that he's also someone that overworks himself, like kind of like maybe doesn't really necessarily take care of himself in the best way too. Just fucking pounding Red Bulls and
terrible.
He looks like he doesn't sleep. So I kind of agree with that as well. So when they finally get to the club, there's a lot of stuff that transpires at the club. I'll just talk about it as like a whole. First of all, I love how we have met Anna Paquin's character earlier in the movie. She's able to get into the club with him. I love when she's talking to Seymour Hoffman about the DJ. And she's like, oh, I can't believe like you like him. And then he's like, oh, I'm like a fan of like his earlier work. And she's like, his earlier work?
He's trying
so hard to be hip.
Who's trying to be hip. It's like Philip Seymour Hoffman, I love the dude, but he was never able to come up. Like, the only time he ever came up believably hip was in Almost Famous.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's funny too when Edward Norton comes back, like, yo, we're all getting in, like, what's taking so long? And then she's like standing, she's like, you're the guy with the dog. He's like, oh yeah, I met you earlier, like whatever. And then he's like, well, what are you doing here? Like, and he's like, oh, we're together, we're lovers. And then he's like, oh, there's always room for lovers. And he's like, basically like, Monty, no. And she's like, oh, well, I have friends with me. And he's like, girls? She's like, no. And he's like, no, what are you talking about? I can't bring a bunch of guys in here. and then she gets to hang out with him for a little bit. And I do. I love that line. I mean, I feel like I've used that line in real life. I love that line. Champagne for my
Oh,
real friends,
champagne.
and real pain for my sham friends. Uh, oh, I mean, still, I try to use it as often as I can because it's really good. It's a really good
Like
line.
I was thinking about starting my review because I for the anniversary reviews I usually like to start it with a quote.
Oh yeah.
So I'm debating this one or the fuck the Puerto Ricans and I mean
This-
I'm between those two. Like champagne, but I like it because it's like it's a nice one. Like you said, I've used it myself. And then, but then I'm like, fuck them people. You know, like if you're scrolling Instagram, you hear that thing, you're like, oh, what was this? I
yeah.
want to read this review.
Right.
No, but yeah,
So
that's a
it's
great line. Like I saw you posted it.
it's so good. It's so good. I like that this is supposed to be a celebration for Monty, but like really like what it is trying to close up like he he has to settle what the whole thing like with the people he was working for and uh who ultimately
That's
like narked
actually
him
the
out.
scene that I don't care too much about the movie.
What?
Honestly, that's
Right.
like my least favorite part. Of all that whole stuff.
That all that stuff. I mean like cuz he doesn't really hang out with Naturel because he basically tells her to go off and dance with Anna Paquin's character to have fun. Frank ends up like going off with that cocktail server to do probably what we think he's gonna do, and then, and then of
White
course
lines. They even have the song.
yeah, and of course Jacob is like enthralled with the high school student, right? So now all their kind of different worlds are like colliding a little bit,
Yeah.
and um we already talked about the conversation that Monty has with Jacob about Doyle, and like I think that solidifies their friendship about like like I'm trusting you with this, with this animal that I put, that put its trust in me when I saved it, and like now I want to put, have that be the same thing with you. I love how he points out that like Doyle hates Frank, and then he's like Doyle hates Frank. Naturel's parents are allergic, so like they can't have the dog, so it goes to you. And then he gives him the pep talk about the high school student. It wouldn't read well now, I don't think, that conversation, because it sounds like you're like condoning, like, yeah, whatever, just go for it. But I think from his perspective, like I said earlier, it's just like, I met Naturel when she was young, and like, he is perceiving it a little differently than
Like I like that's like a too personal. But like when I hear those stuff like that, like I don't think too much about because like my father is 14 years older than my mom.
right, right.
So being, like don't get me wrong, I'm not here condoning saying that, if you're
Of
30,
course,
go
of
try
course.
to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
sex with a high school student, but like I don't know, to me, like sometimes like I feel like if it's like if the person's like over 21, like who cares if their partner is 15, 20, like that's their decision to love somebody that's older than them. Like I guess for me, it's just as I said, my father's 14 years older than my mom, so I'm used to like that age difference. Like I know,
Yeah,
like just being 30 years old now, like my father, his health isn't as great as my mom's because of
right,
the age difference. So I'm saying like Monty's like reasoning might be not, has, like I said, he's coming from his personal experience with that. But I
right.
said, like, to me, it's like those type of conversations, like it all depends. Like I said, in Jacob's situation, no,
It's not the
because you're
same.
her teacher, you're her
Right, right. It's
teacher,
not. I
and
like
she's
how
a
he
high
does
school
compare.
student.
Yeah, he does compare to that the situation with Naturel, but it's completely different. Like
Yeah,
he
but it's like if she
wasn't
was a college
Monty. No,
student, maybe.
Monty wasn't like her teacher, and like I think was she 18 or on the cusp, or she was in that scene. She lies about how old
Yeah, I
she
think
is,
like
right?
I think she
Because she
was
makes
like
that
probably like that.
because she makes that comment like what because she says I'm 18, and she's like, well, what if I was 17? And then he was like, well, that was shortening the conversation a bit, but like you're 18, so it doesn't matter. And like their situation was different than the whole high school teacher
Completely
student
different.
rent.
Like,
Um, before we end up seeing what happens with them, though, we Monty and Frank have that conversation, uh, where you finally get to humanize Frank a bit, where like Monty tells him I was so close to pulling out, I was going to put money into like stocks and bonds and like work with you and like figure out how to like make my money multiply, and then like then there's this whole like kind of like I didn't do this and this is how I fucked up, and then that's where you kind of take seeing Frank take ownership of like, well, no, like like you're gonna get out, basically it's not that long, and then when you get out I'll be there, and like maybe we can own a bar, all this, and like it's like I always felt that stuff was just lip service. I think there's stuff that he wants to believe as his friend, but I don't think he even believes that that is what is going to happen in 7 years. And I
at
think Monty
all.
I think Monty knows that too because he basically was like, "You come a long way to get away from like basically owning a bar and doing all this other stuff. Like you have a career, and like and Monty's like very honest. Like what kind of job can he get in the straight world? He only knows like a life of crime, and like
And then after a prison sentence, you pretty much fucked.
yeah." And so in that moment though, I think it's finally cool to kind of see that like Frank's scared too. Like he doesn't really want to lose his friend because I think he knows what that once he's gone, then that's kind of it. I think he realizes that as much as he wants to believe that that won't be the case, I think he believes that. But then I also think he feels enormous guilt for not saying anything to stop it, to stop
Yeah,
anything
it's
that he
like
was doing.
there's always those situations where like in this, like something like that, like your friend is going to be down a rough path. Like I've had friends who went to prison and stuff like that for for drugs and stuff like that. Like that's not me, but sometimes you feel like you can't tell people how to live their life. Like some people, like like me and you, we went to college, so we have a better path in life. But it's like I have friends that just dropped out of school and selling
Yeah,
drugs or just doing stuff that's all they know. Like they don't have they have street smarts, but they don't have the smarts to really make it into in the real world with real jobs. So like sometimes like I understand Barry Pepper's character. Like you probably feel you should have done more, but then it's like, what can you really do? Like this is the life you chose. Like if I tell him something, all I could maybe do is get him mad.
right. Exactly. I agree. Um, but I do. I mean, it's a genuine. I think it's a really good scene between them, and it's good to kind of finally get something real out of. And Barry Pepper's really good at bouncing between like that kind of cocky, arrogant character that we meet in the beginning to like someone who is showing like empathy as well,
Vulnerable.
and showing that he's pretty torn up about the situation as well. Um, I didn't want to linger linger on like the actual like lead up to the kiss with Anna Paquin and Jacob. I mean, it happens, and I think what that moment shows though is that like I like their reaction after it happens, where she seems genuinely shocked, and then he looks at her, and then he like kind of shakes his head, like, "Oh, I knew this was wrong. Like, I shouldn't have like done this." It's
No,
like,
she looks like a little girl.
yeah, and I think in that moment he sees it. I think he sees it, and I think she realizes it too, where she's been trying to act adult this entire time she's been at the club with him, or even the whole time she was flirting a bit when they were in the classroom. I think once it became real, that she was like, "Whoa, that was too much," and then he realized, "Yeah, this is not whatever like wish fulfillment he thought was going to come out of that. He wasn't going to get it, and he
Yeah, it's
realized it right then."
sometimes like certain things are just better left off as fantasies or what ifs. Like do
Yeah,
not act on it.
and I do love like the really fun like tracking shot when when he leaves the bathroom.
Yeah,
His
he
face
got the
is
classic Spike
like,
Dolly.
yeah, Dolly, yeah, yeah. He's just like, what did I do? And they actually do that when Edward Norton then walk into the club too. It's a really cool like Dolly shot as well. It's like really Spike Lee does some really cool technical stuff, and I love like the double cuts when people hug in the movie. That's like just something that he likes to do. Um, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
just like
very that
little
is
like
his famous.
Spike Lee isms that he throws in. That work though. They work for him.
He has to make it a joint. He has to make it a
Yeah,
joint.
yeah. If he
That's why
can't, if it's not,
like with Old Boy is just a Spike Lee film. Because remember
yeah,
when that stuff got taken away from him,
from him, yeah,
they cut it they cut like 40 minutes. He's like, yeah, you ain't getting the joint.
yeah. And then we get more Frank and stuff, and we get it with Naturel, and that scene rings true too because now he feels guilty about like all the things that he should have done, and now he wants her to feel guilty about maybe all the things that she should have done, and calls her out for like like you lived in that apartment, you took his money. Talks to her about like the earrings she's wearing, the silver dress, the trip she went on to Puerto Rico that she'd never been to Puerto Rico before. Like he took her, and that was all bought with drug money. And like you know, I actually feel I feel bad for her throughout the whole thing until like basically the end when it's like she finally gets some validation that she didn't like narc on him. So like she thinks she's in this safe space with her friends, and now this one guy who she thought was her friend is basically like, I think you did it. Like I think you're the one that like made all this happen, and like I feel completely sorry for her in that moment. even though I get where it's coming from him because he feels guilty, and
Of course.
now he's projecting onto her, and it's a really powerful moment. I that scene ends on a really insulting note for her where she has to slap him. Was he call her a spick skank skeezer? I He's like, I told Monty when he first met you that I thought you were
That's
spick
completely
skank
a
skeezer.
fragment.
Yeah. And then she just fucking smacks him. And then of course
That
Jacob
was a really
stumbles.
good scene because it's
It's
like
a great
that gives
scene.
her more than just yeah, because it gives her more than just being the girlfriend who's just basically there to be like, oh, this is what you messed up. So I like that they
Yeah.
gave her something like that because it made her be more than just like just the cliche girlfriend who's like, you had this good thing and we could have built a family. You pretty much lost it type of character that she had
Yeah.
been for a majority of the movie.
And I like that even she to make it better, she's like, yo, if you want to make me the bad guy, make me the bad guy. If that's what you need,
And
like,
that makes you feel better.
yeah, if that makes you feel better, and like, you know, I I think Rosario Dawson plays that well because she's playing it like I know I didn't do anything wrong. Like I don't know why you're accusing me because I know I didn't do and I wouldn't. And you can tell she plays it that way, and it's a really good like solid scene for her and him. I think they're really good in that scene together. And then of course Jacob stumbles back from his like foolish mistake. And I guess the best thing about I can remember this when we first saw it because it wasn't like a packed theater, but it was a decent amount of people. When he
Yeah,
tells
because
him that
this
he
didn't make crazy amount of money.
yeah, so like when he tells him that he kissed his student, and he's like, "What?" He's like, "Listen to me, I kissed a student," and he's like, "Who you trying to be, R. Kelly?" That got like a big laugh in our theater when we saw it.
Like when that shit hit, I forgot all about that line. So when they said it, my wife just looked at me. I was like, bro, like that's what I said. Like the fact that everything happened after is like
Yeah,
it's like what I see. I think like in Entourage, it was like another show where they made a crack about Weinstein. I'm like, bro, they knew.
yeah, they knew, they
Like
knew.
it's
Yeah,
it's like the fact that this was said in the movie in 2002 and he still. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love R. Kelly music. He did a lot of great
yeah,
music in the 2000s,
yeah.
but it's just crazy how everything happened now because of the whole documentary and everything like that. But it's like, no, first you could
Every
have stopped him in the early '90s when he freaking married Aaliyah.
Aaliyah,
First
yeah,
of all,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like the signs have been there for like 30 years, but it's just crazy that it's like that line. Like I said, I forgot about it. So when they said it, I cracked up. I'm like, wow, like it hits more now because he got sentenced this year, but it's like that
yeah.
was still a whole nother like 18 years of you
Yep,
guys could have prevented so much stuff.
it did not. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a great line. It's greatly delivered by Barry Pepper as well. He has a
It's
lot of them in the
perfect.
movie, and that's one of the best ones. And I love when he's like, "No, you're not listening to me." He's like, "Just fucking drink," and he's like, "I don't want to drink." And he's like, "All right, get him something to drink." He's like, "All right, I'll get a water." He's like, "No, no, no," like hit him like he needs to drink.
Like you just there's stuff like you need a like you said, we
Yeah,
both like to go out to drink with friends, so we know that feeling. Like, nah,
yeah.
you taking a shot, you.
No, you're taking a shot. Like, fuck that. No, you're not drinking water. And like, God, I think I was there as recently as last weekend with a friend. So it's like, yeah, it's a
Or
very
like
scene
they
that you
drinking a
hit.
beer, like, nah, you drinking some hard stuff today. Fuck the
Yeah,
beer.
yeah. Like, fuck the beer. Um, and then I guess that leads to like the scene that you're talking about where we find out that Kotia was the one that ratted him out. I can agree with you. I think that scene doesn't really prevent me from thinking the movie's any greater than what it is, or like less than it is. Um, but it does seem weirdly detached from like everything else that's going on.
Yeah,
It feels a little tacked on, I guess, because they have to
it's not
explain
a
like
bad scene. It's just like I said, it's a exposition that's needed, but then it's just like it's like
yeah,
the like I said, it messes up the flow a little bit, but not where it ruins the movie at all for me.
right,
It's
yeah,
literally the most blast scene of the movie for me.
yeah, and it's like it does feel like it's in a different movie compared to the rest of it.
Yeah, like if it
But
happened some Carlitos way,
yeah,
that scene is perfect for that.
but I will give credit to Edward Norton here. I think like other than the "fuck you" monologue, I think this is one of his best moments in the movie too, where he has the gun and he's
I
like,
agree.
and all he cares about, he's like, "Tell me why you said it was her." Like, and that's all he wants to know. Like, why did you make me think it was her? And he's really good in that moment with I like that's if I had to take anything from that scene, it's that he was really good in
I
that
agree.
moment. But yeah, it does feel detached from the rest of the movie. It like everything feels a bit more character driven and like intimate, and then this feels like it's in like you said, it should be in like
It's like
Carlito's
it
way or
stops
like
the flow a little bit, then on the tracks a little bit. and the whole
Yeah.
floor of the club scene.
Yep. And once they leave the club, like Naturelle has already left, and she's already home back in the apartment when they get there, and he lays in bed with her. At this point, he knows that she didn't, you know, do anything wrong. And like as a viewer, it sucks that he finds out because there's not much movie left. So it's like it sucks that it took that long. Like it's like damn, like she stuck with you this whole time, and you thought that it might have been her, and like you know,
Yeah,
but
I feel like that's like the drug dealer mentality.
yeah, I am glad that they finally get there though, and they do show it that like
Yeah,
that he realized it wasn't
nah,
her,
you had a real one.
and then it gets to the scene which another other than the monologue, this scene when I first saw it in theaters where they take that walk, and I love the score when they take the walk. It's like the day's almost over. It's like early morning, and they're just
Yeah,
staring out, and it's like I feel like you would be talking about nothing when he's like, oh, like wouldn't that be the life to like work on a tugboat, and like they're just talking about random stuff because it's almost like they're nervous about there's not much conversation left to have because like days almost like your time's almost up, but it feels like that is what a real situation would be like where you're like, what else do we say at this point? Like, you're just kind of grasping onto like whatever conversation you have left. And that's why I like about that moment when they're just walking around. And then of course it gets to the moment where he told Frank that he needed a favor at the club, uh and that
that
favor
scene is tough
the
sometimes.
favor is to like make him ugly because he feels like he can't go into prison looking like Edward Norton. He can't go in looking
They'll
pretty.
spit at you. They try to make him.
Yeah,
Make,
yeah. um
no, I mean
so
it's a smart technique. I've never seen that in a movie or in a thing, or even
so
heard in
that's
real life people say.
yeah, that's how I felt about it too. Like even then when I was 18, I was like, dude, like is this really gonna he wants him to like beat him up? Uh
Well,
and and it's such a great moment too, because Frank's like, no, I'm gonna do that. Like and then he kind of plays on like, I need this from you, and then just plays on like his anger and insecurity to get him to do it. Like
yeah,
I
as
know
I
I
said,
think
I feel like his face there is like you could tell just like he's taking everything we've seen throughout the movie and probably stuff that we didn't know, and it just he didn't want to do it, but then once he starts, it's just like that rage in Barry Pepper's face. It's just like he
yeah,
just letting it all out there.
because like when he tells him like I think he wanted to like kick the shit out of me a little bit since this all started, like like, and that's kind of true, right? He kind of feels,
Probably,
it's kind of true.
yeah.
And
You set up the whole movie.
yeah, like and then like and then he throws him in his face like that, all that stuff you said, how you're gonna be there for me, and like all the things that you would say to a like to get under a really good
To
friend's
anger
skin,
somebody when you
to
want to
anger
break them.
someone, and then honestly, it takes Jacob getting involved, and then like him hitting Jake to kind of like provoke like I guess the ultimate anger, and then like him just laying there and calling him a pussy, telling him to do it and do it, and then when he does it, it's such an intense like Barry Pepper. So I think that's probably his best scene in the movie. It's so intense, and
Yeah, that's definitely the most memorable one because that's the one scene that I feel like is focused on him because
yeah,
we know Jacob isn't gonna do it, and even
yeah,
Jacob probably would have given him little pussy swings.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like you know that Frank would have that anger and that tough guy, like mafioso stuff to do
yeah,
damage because
and
he really does do that. He
yeah.
leaves him.
And by the way, Barry Pepper got so into that scene they actually cracked Edward Norton's nose and
Oh,
like messed it up. But like, and Edward Norton said that Barry Pepper was so like apologetic, felt so bad, and Edward Norton went to the hospital, came back a few hours later, and they finished the scene. He wasn't mad at him. He wasn't like, oh, like I can't believe he did that. It
that's the
was like they
thickest.
were in the moment. They were completely in the moment, and
I
like,
didn't know that's crazy. 'Cause that's the second movie of Spike Lee that somebody gets their nose broken. Remember, Adrian Brody got his nose
oh
broken in Center
yeah,
of Sam.
that's
It's like,
true.
oh, what's
Yeah,
going on, Spike? I mean, you mentioned that's like
that's totally
people
true. I
like
forgot about that.
you signed up for a Spike movie, you better best believe you might get a broken nose.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
You mentioned that.
And like honestly, if you watch the commentary, Spike Lee points out there's a cut where it's like far away where they pan out, and you can see where he does hit him,
The
like
moment.
the moment where he hits him, and they kept it in there. Um,
Wow, that's crazy. I
but
didn't know
yeah,
that.
um, I love that scene too because then it gets like completely quiet, and then all you hear is like the birds, like the like flapping of the wings and like all that stuff, and you can't, and then like you don't even hear Barry Pepper screaming, but you can tell that guttural like cry and scream. He's like clenching his bloody fists, and like the whole scene is
Yeah, it's
just
like he,
it's really good.
like you can tell he didn't want to do it, but he knows he needed to do it.
Right, right. I agree. And then I love that uh it's that they have that shot panned out and then the sound comes back in and you can hear Doyle barking and you can hear Frank kind of crying and it's just a small moment but I love that like Monty like consoles him like basically like you know thank you almost for doing this like it was like a true like in a weird way this like true show of friendship.
That's real friendship right there.
Yeah, like it's like where it's like I need you to do this for me and you did it and almost like also I'm sorry that I made you feel this way too. Like it's a lot in that scene, I think. Uh Again, with these three friends that probably would not be connected if not for him, but like they are together in this like really crazy moment that is also very just
Oh,
genuine and feels real.
that's the situation.
Yeah. And then gets back to the apartment, Naturel sees them all fucked up and and they actually get a I think they get a triple cut when she like runs up and like grabs him. They don't get
In
like
the
a Spike
tree,
Lee
yeah,
double.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
They don't get
I
a
think there's
triple
a
one.
triple.
Yeah, they get a triple cut from Spike Lee. Um
They got
and
definitely
I
get
like
that.
when I love when she's nursing him and like his emotion too that's so genuine where he's like it's hitting him how much he screwed up his life and he starts crying and he's like
No,
I'm so sorry I messed
yeah.
everything up and like she's like no don't do that like whatever and if she wants to take him to the hospital of course he doesn't want to go um and then the dad walks in and he's like Jesus I love because we know what happened he's like Jesus Christ what did they do to you like it's just like no it's just one person just a friend and then she's asking her like what happened and he's like no he just showed up like this and then they have that other emotional moment where he's like, I just want to leave it right here. I don't need you to take me, and it'll be easier this way. And then like the dad's like, no, like I need to know where this place is for visits, and like, and who is this going to be easier on? Me letting you just leave like right now. Also, a really good genuine moment for them too, because like Barry Cox has a line where he's like saying like towards the end where he's like, "Come on, buddy, like let me take you," where he almost sounds like he wants to cry. Where it's like, just let me, please, let me take you and like and
That's what
they
you get somebody like Brian Cox for those
yeah
scenes.
it's a very like subtle like kind of thing where he's like almost like like please let me do
It's like
this.
a true father and like love, like it's like everybody always says, like the love you have for your child is never compares to any other love.
Yeah, I agree and like he and of course before they leave she puts the ice. I always thought this scene was so mean. I know this is like a small thing. She puts the ice in the bag for like an ice pack and then like of course he says like I want you to forget about me and she's like no like I don't want you basically you go on and live your life and her no is also it reminds me of like Brian Cox's like subtle like I'm about to cry. She almost seems like a baby the way she says no like it's hitting her like don't say that like
Yeah,
no
the
like
guy she loves, like
yeah like it's like in this scene like what is where he's going what's happening to him it's like it's becoming real for everyone that's in that scene like it's like this is it and like you can feel it from like
yeah,
all
it's
three
not a
of them.
fantasy.
But the part I think that's me though is that I feel like he could have waited till he got outside to dump the ice because he dumps it right outside the door. I was like, she probably heard it.
Yeah, he probably knows it's probably gonna melt.
It's probably about yeah. Um, and then so then we get to the stuff with uh I think it's like a 10-11 minute scene. This whole like last like
Yeah,
car
like
ride.
8 to 10
Because
minutes.
I
It's a
think
long one.
I think on the CD, the last track is like 11 or 12 minutes, so I think it's just as long as the actual scene. I mentioned this before when I brought this movie up on our anniversary show with Owen, and I was like, I don't know why because my real dad and I weren't really close. I have a good relationship
Yeah,
with my
you
step.
mentioned. I remember that.
I have a really good relationship with my stepdad, but I don't know why this scene gets to me every time I watch it because I'm not really feeling it on a like father son level. Um,
Yeah,
but it's insanely emotional every time I watch it, and I think a lot of it has to do with it's a combination of everything, right? It's the score is great. We've talked about that.
the
Um,
score, the
the
flash
the
forwards.
the flash forwards are good, and then just Brian Cox's narration of it. Like this is why he's one of the greatest actors alive right
Yeah,
now,
like
I think.
he has like Morgan Freeman was like he like you
Yeah,
when he speaks, you pay attention.
yeah, and I love the build up to it where he's kind of like, where he basically tells him wait before they start the whole sequence where he's like, you just give me the word and I'll make a turn. He's like a turn to where, and he like that's where he kind of
But
sets
that's
up.
a real one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a
yeah.
real
So
one.
like, I'm gonna like when I was 18 and saw this in theaters, right? I hadn't read the book. I didn't know anything about it, right? In our
So you probably
brains is
thought that they were gonna do it.
hold on, oh, no. In our brains as 18-year-olds seeing it, we were like, how that movie ended, the whole like this is the life that you're showing us. I took it as fucking fact because I wasn't watching movies like that where I was like, oh, are they trying to like give us like an ambiguous ending or like whatever? So at 18, I was like, fuck yeah, like I love that for him. Like, don't go to prison, like blah
But
blah
yeah,
blah.
sadly, we know that's not what.
And then you get older, and I don't even need to find out from like the filmmaker or anything as you get older. You watch it when you get older and you understand how movies work. You're like, that didn't really happen, did it? Like you're like,
At
they
all.
show that was like the life he could have had. That was the ultimate wish fulfillment. I think that's what makes the ending even more sad for me because it's like it's showing you like what could be for him if he were to do it. Um, there's certain lines that like get me like emotionally where he's like because he's given up, he's an alcoholic, right? But when he says like I haven't had a drink in how many years, but I'll have like one last whiskey with my boy, like all that stuff is just so like good. And
Yeah.
and it's it's a really just awesome sequence that uh hits me in the gut once it's like once they set up like, oh, you can't like send word to like your friends, you can't get in touch with them, but like maybe in a few years, and even though this is dangerous, you can send word to Natural. And when that fucking Greyhound bus moves and then the music starts and they see each other, last night I was like, fuck, really, man? I was like, I still get like super like emotional like watching it. It's just like it's so like that's what you want for them both, actually.
No, yeah, because it's how like anytime like with Sopranos and like with Breaking Bad, like I love that Walter dies because I don't when a movie or show ends and like a character ends in prison, I don't like this. I'm like, yeah, but I want to know what happens. What happens in jail? That's
Right.
usually why I tend to like definitive ends, like when it's like a movie about like a drug dealer or like just a criminal. Like I like when they
Yeah.
die
Yeah.
because then I don't have to wonder what if, what happens inside. That's like with Sopranos when it goes pitch black. I like to think that Tony just got shot on the back or some shit.
Yeah, I agree.
So
And
like,
I love
yeah,
yeah, and I do love too that even before like that whole monologue starts, that Monty sees all the people from his monologue that he blamed and hated and all this stuff. It's that now they're smiling at him, and now these are the things that he's gonna miss too about living in that city, about like being a part of that culture, like all the things that he was kind of trashing on the beginning. Like now he's seeing them in a positive light as he is leaving and won't be able to see them or that environment anymore for 7 years. I love the callback to that too, where it's like,
yeah. Like if you move to New York, I was like, if you
it's
move
such a
to New
powerful
York,
moment.
you gotta like take the city with all that. So it's like you nailed this. Like Monty's realizing like this is part of what makes New York what it makes it. All the immigrants that like New York is filled with minorities.
Yeah, and like it's I mean, it's even more sad because they show her of course she got pregnant, they had kids in this fantasy.
Was
And
it chalupas?
yeah, your chalupas. They said in the beginning, right? When they're in the scene in the bathtub. Um, but like, I still get chills when like that whole last line. He's like, when you tell your kids like this whole life same came so close to never happening, and then it like cuts back to them like
The
on the road
reality.
again. And it's the reality of like when I was 18, I was like, they took that turn, right? But like, as an adult, as an
This whole
adult, you're
time
like,
you were watching like yeah okay okay this is we're just getting a flash forward. He came out
and
of
dude,
jail already.
imagine like when you got to a certain age, I felt absolutely crushed when I realized that like that wasn't the actual ending. I was like, oh, they really, oh fuck, he went to prison. But I guess
Like
that
they gave you
is,
the happy, they gave you the somewhat happy ending, but they give you reality as
and you
well.
know what? Because the reality is, he wouldn't have put his dad through that. He wouldn't have been like, he wouldn't have had it
No,
be
that's
where
just too much
like
on everybody.
on everybody, and like, and that's the reality of it. Spike Lee has said that so many people when he like back, so the commentary on the DVD is back when the movie first came out, And so like he kind of
Yeah.
talks about when they screened it and how so many people were like so excited about the ending, and then him having to break it to people. And they're like, and in the
It was like
in
the
the book,
Parasite ending.
yeah, and in the book, it's a pretty definitive in the book that it's a like I you really read it
Okay.
later. It's a fantasy, but like,
Okay.
Spike Lee did like that. People did think like, oh, I wonder what route he took, because you could kind of if you want to be a naive 18-year-old like I was, you could be like, nah, he
Now,
got
now
away.
you even at this age, like I like to think that they did that turn. Again,
Yeah,
nobody gonna
yeah.
give.
Like fucking depending on my mood, and depending on my mood when I just watch it today, like, nah, they made it. They
If I'm
made that turn.
angry, nah, he went to jail. If I want to
uh,
be jolly, like
if
nah,
I'm
he
feeling if
he
I'm
had
feeling
his he
sad,
had his
if I'm
chalupas.
yeah, if I'm feeling sad, like, no, he met up with Natural again. They had their chalupas and they lived happily ever after. But no, like the fucking cold hard reality of a situation like this is that that's not how it would end. He would go to jail, he'd go to prison, serve his time. I do kind of think sometimes like where would these characters be like after this? I'm glad you made that point about Frank, that I don't think he'd be there. There's a slight case for Jacob, but
Hopefully, he's not in jail with
and I
Monty
cut
for.
statutory. And then I also think that like since Naturo is so fiercely loyal this whole time, that maybe she would wait for him.
I
Like
mean, she
I mean,
probably would have maybe for the first like 4 years, but 7 years is
seven's a
tough.
long time. Yeah, and she was
that's
young.
that's
You know,
a,
and she's young. She was younger than him, so she had like a lot more life to like that she could
yes. That
explore
that
and
that
live.
that's what I would see Monty be like. Like you're young, like live your life. Don't waste your
Right.
prime years waiting for me.
And like another thing that we didn't mention too is that like we're talking about like what's his life going to be like when he's gone. She doesn't know anything else either. She only knows the life that they had living off that
Because
money
she
and
she
doing.
got off. She got him right when she became an adult.
Yeah. So like she has to find herself too. That's another thing that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we went through the whole fucking movie. I felt so good doing that. I do want to talk a little bit about like what before we wrap up. So when this movie came out, they talk about in the commentary, and I want to see what you kind of think. Edward Norton said he learned a lot about the release of movies after doing this, because he said that Touchstone Disney clearly loved what they had. They thought they had a really good movie, which is
Yeah, they
why
thought they gave it like a prime like
they gave
Oscar
it like
release.
a December like limited release, right, to start. But he was saying that it's also a very crowded, like some of those movies that are in that season open a little earlier and they get a little bit more attention, and he thinks that's what kind of hurt it. Like all these other movies got all this rush of attention from like the Academy and other awards, and really 25th Hour only had that like sweet spot in December to get it. Could have gotten some Golden Globe nominations. Only got one for Terrence Blanchard's score. At least they got that right. And but other than that, it didn't get any real awards attention at all. And then that is what they felt stalled the movie, even at the box office too, where it didn't get to
Yeah,
build over time. It kind of like, and he didn't blame the studio for that, because he was aware of like, I know what a studio does when they want to dump something and they don't believe in it. It was like they believed in it, and which is why they gave it the December release that they did, thinking that would be enough, that the movie would be strong enough to like, and people would
it's
notice
hard
it. Yeah, it is hard, and
because
yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, because it didn't do the financial business that I probably should have done when it came out. Definitely didn't get the awards attention that I probably should have, and I think that's a lot to do maybe about Spike Lee. Then I mean, I think like I think there's a lot of factors as to why this didn't like.
because like I think like it's now like you mentioned or like look at I still think December is like an Oscar release date. But I
Right.
feel like when it's so late in the because like I said, this was December 19th. When it's so late into the year, it's like it feels like it's too late to make a noise. Like I think $1 Million Baby is the only movie in the last like 20 years that got released like late December and still was a juggernaut.
Carried
Because
on. Yeah.
I feel like mid-November is like a sweet spot for it because it gives people time throughout like the end of the year to see your movies before the awards and for it to have a substantial box office success by the time the Oscar nominations come out. I feel like
Right.
late December, like obviously is good, but it's becoming it's I think probably it was even back then it's too crowded. Like look at this next week. We have Babylon, Women Talking, I Want to Dance with
Yeah.
Somebody, A Man Called Ove.
in
It's
the last
like
fucking
it's
week of
like
December. Yeah.
and yeah, then you have White Noise coming to Netflix. Or you have Glass Onion coming to Netflix next week as well. It's like it's like late December sometime. It's like it's I get the strategy behind it. Like you said, they didn't dump it. But it's also
Yeah.
like sometimes like if you want to be like a true juggernaut, like you need to release it like mid-November. I feel like that's a good enough
Yeah.
time.
I agree. It definitely deserved more love. Just to put things in perspective, it has a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's fresh. Um, Interesting enough, Cinema Score, which is like what how they grade from opening day
No,
audiences,
yeah.
it has a B
I saw
minus.
that
It got a
about
B
those opening.
minus. Yeah, it got a B
Not
minus
that
on
bad,
Cinema Score.
honestly.
I'm kind of surprised. Thought it'd be a little higher, but that maybe they might maybe thought they were getting something else.
That ending could do a lot of damage.
Yeah. Um, Mark LaSalle from the San Francisco Chronicle uh, wrote wrote this 5 years after the September 11th attacks and said about the movie released 15 months after September 11, 2001. Spike Lee's 25th Hour is the only great film dealing with the September 11th tragedy. 25th Hour is as much as an urban historical document as Rossellini's Open City, filmed in the immediate aftermath of the Nazi occupation of Rome. That's how he feels about 25th Hour as a whole, as far as like its depiction of uh 9/11, even though it's on a movie about 9/11. uh
No,
and
but
this is
that's which I love.
yeah, Roger Ebert added it to his great
My
movies
man.
list on December 16th, 2009. I do remember when this is when I was reading reviews back to the lot. Roger Ebert did give it a very, very good review. He loved it.
He went four out
um
of four, right?
yeah, 4 out of 4. He really loved it.
Yeah, he
um
championed that movie a lot.
A.O. Scott, Richard Roper, who was working with Roger Ebert at the time after Siskel died, and Ebert placed it on their respective lists for the best films of the decade.
In the
And it was
decade.
named the 26th greatest film since 2000 in a 2016 BBC poll of 177 critics. And I mean, I appreciate that it's found life since 20 years later. Um, and, like I said, I will continue to make it my friendship rite of passage movie for new people I meet. Like
Mine's is Pulp, but it's so popular that
yeah,
people usually
people have
always
seen it.
see it.
Like I go from being like disappointed that someone hasn't seen it, and then I go, well, this is exciting. So like I get to like show it to them,
Excited
right?
to,
Right.
I
And so
love putting
far,
people on.
yeah, and so far everyone I've shown the movie to, I has not.
They like it.
It's like they like it. I only reference the Owen and Lance one because those ones stand out to me the most. Where it's like,
I
my
know you're really
friendships
close
kind
to
of,
them, and
yeah, my friendships kind of formed around that and that, like sharing that movie with them, and it's still like I said, like when I watched it again last night, and every time I feel like I'm watching it for the first time every time I watch it, it still continues to stick with me
I always get
in a
jealous.
real way.
Like whenever like I always said to people because they know since I do the movie page, people be DM me on the regular like, hey, can you recommend so and so? And I always say like when I mention certain movies and they say they haven't seen it, I'll be like, I'm so jealous that you get to experience this for the first time.
Yeah,
Like I like I love that's why I love going back and discovering older movies from the 50s, 60s because since like I'm 30 years old, I've been watching movies religiously since I was like 3 or 4.
yeah.
Like all those old classic movies, like like I don't have that seeing it for the first time like reaction anymore unless I go to movies that came out like before I was born.
Yeah, I agree. Any final thoughts you want to add to just your overall experience and like kind of it's still standing up today or
No, it's like we said, we're both very happy that more people are like discovering it. With social media is also good because Spike, anytime any of his movies have anniversaries, even if it's a random stuff like a 28-year anniversary, not even a milestone one, he shouts it out. So like I expect him to have something cooking for Monday about 25 hours, which we didn't really mention is one of the very few Spike Lee movies that doesn't have a black lead, which is rare, but it also
that's
shows
a
that
very good point.
he could.
I'm glad you brought that up at the end there. Yeah, that's a very
Yeah,
good
because it's
point.
like people feel only that he can only do black stories. I'm like, no, this is like I said, it's your favorite Spike Lee movie is my third favorite, and it does not
Yeah,
have a black lead.
right. I
So
agree.
it was. I feel like that was very important for him too at that point because it's like he was just known as the black filmmaker. It's like when people say like, oh, why can't Jordan Peele make a movie with a white lead? Like he says, like I've seen that movie before,
Yeah, before, yeah.
and that was always Spike Lee's thing. Like I want to tell, like it's like when people get mad when it's like a black director or even a white director to have like Wes Anderson. He doesn't really have much black characters there. It's like, bro, some people when you are writer director, you sometimes write what you know. Like
Yeah,
being a
and that's
Latino,
fine.
like being a Latino, I wouldn't really know how to write a Jewish film. I could maybe write for like a story about black people because I live in Harlem now and I grew up around black people. I could maybe do it about other Spanish cultures, but Spike Mace. Like I said, he didn't write the script. He just knew how to tell the story because he's so New York. But
Right.
it's like, like it was important for Spike. Like, look, you guys say I'm just a black filmmaker. Here's a great film I made that has a white lead.
Right. And I want to add to like I mean, even though this movie is purely New York and like it has Spike Lee's DNA as far as a director, as a being much a part of like his love for New York. I also want to point out that he also has respect for other people's projects and the things that they write. So he adapted this because he really liked this book. He really liked the script. He didn't try to put like other than including the 9/11 stuff. Like this was just him loving someone else's story and wanting to do it justice. And like that is what it comes down to. And I think that's why I said earlier, like it's one of those Spike Lee movies that doesn't have an agenda. It's like he just wants to tell like a simple story. And I think
Inside Man is another one.
and that's another one too. And I mean, probably his most mainstream movie, I would say,
Yeah,
right?
that's his biggest
Yeah,
commercial hit. Like
yeah,
it makes you kind of wish that Spike should be one of those one for them, one for me directors because
yeah. Like I
Inside
gave you a
Man,
hit, now let
like
me
I
do
did not know he
it.
had that movie. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did not know that
exactly.
he had that kind of movie in him, like
At
a heist
all.
movie. Spike Lee.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think it just proves that like he can like adapt someone else's work and make it
Yeah,
you know and have respect for that person's work. Um, and he made a comment during the commentary that like a lot of people come up to him and say that this is their favorite movie of his. And he said that a lot of those people are people that did not catch it in theaters. They saw it either on DVD or on TV. He has a lot of respect for it finding life later. Um, and I mean that's cool too though. I mean it's cool like some things do find life much later than like some things
yeah.
aren't
That's what I
hits
said.
out the
Like
gate.
that's what I said. Like that's why like Scorsese, Edgar Wright, they've all said it. Like a box office bomb doesn't determine like I've always even said it. Like just because a movie doesn't make a lot of money doesn't mean nothing about its quality. And some movies just find life afterwards. Like Scott Pilgrim bombed at the humongously bombed at the box office, and myself and many included feel that is Edgar Wright's best movie.
Yeah,
Like I said, like I'm glad when movies find life because it also shows like the power of that film. That is okay. It wasn't a hit at the beginning, but look, 20 years later, you got people like I said, like me and you who love it so much that
yeah,
like I said, like I used to always get looked at like, oh, how you put this over He Got Game, over Clockers, over Jungle Fever? I'm like, it's a better
yeah,
movie than those. Simple as
yeah.
that.
I agree. Well, if more people want to discover it, it is you're able to rent it on Amazon Prime, and it also is streaming on Disney Plus. I just looked that up. I had no idea, 'cause I
Probably
actually own it.
it's probably for like those like because remember other countries they have like that Disney Plus
Oh,
Star thing, so they
got it,
have
got it.
more adult film. Because I'm like that's because when I had to put my Blu-ray on because like
Yeah, I
sometimes
had
I get too lazy to
to.
put it on. Like if
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
streaming somewhere, I just put it on the streamer. So
yeah.
like I would have known it's probably like that Star stuff where it's like Star Disney Plus. Like in those other countries,
The
they tend
countries
to have
have
more
it.
adult fare.
Well, I mean, I hope that more people discover it. It's 20 years old as of December 19th, but still holds up really well. It's still my favorite movie ever just because of the feelings that it kind of gives me when I watch it. And I'm really happy that you were on to discuss with me in detail about the movie
Yeah,
and
we went
about what you.
longer than
Well,
expected, but I love it.
I know, yeah, and as always, guys, you can listen to us across all of our various podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, sorry, Good Pods as well. We're doing really well on Good Pods, so thank you for supporting all the independent podcasters on that platform. And yeah, we will see you soon in another episode, probably with this guy. Spoiler alert. Thanks for
Which
listening,
also features a big argument.
which also features a big argument. So yeah, we will. You'll be listening to us again very soon. Peace.